Her suitcase had that stupid pink ribbon on the handle again. The one I bought her in Myrtle Beach back in '09 because she kept grabbing the wrong bags at the carousel. Funny what sticks with you. Memories you thought were sweet at the time, now just props in a play you didn't know you were in. I lifted the suitcase into the trunk, careful not to slam it. She hates that, says it feels aggressive. God forbid I make noise while helping her lie. Thanks, babe, she said, adjusting her sunglasses. It was overcast. No sun. But she always wore those when she traveled. Said airports made her eyes dry. She kissed me on the cheek. Too fast, too clean, like a damn drive-through interaction, and smiled like she was doing me a favor. I'll text when I land. Okay? Don't wait up. It's just the girls, you know how they are. She laughed. Too hard. Like she was trying to convince herself the story was still holding. And maybe it was. Maybe she believed it counted as the truth if she said it with the right tone. I nodded. I even smiled back. That's the thing they don't tell you about growing older. You get very good at pretending. 40 years of pretending in corporate meetings, barbecues with neighbors, PDA events, anniversary dinners. Smiling becomes a reflex. She opened the car door, paused, and checked her phone again. Tap, scroll, tap, like clockwork. Not a glance at me, not a love you. Not even a second look to see if I was watching. But I was. I noticed her fingers hesitating over the screen, like she was reading something twice. You okay? I asked almost lazily. She jolted. Yeah, just, Amanda's already blowing up the group chat. You know how she gets. Her voice hitched, just a little. I wouldn't have caught it if I hadn't been listening so damn hard. Amanda, right? Her old college friend. The one who always seemed to cancel at the last minute or post Instagram stories from entirely different cities. The one whose laugh I hadn't heard in a decade but apparently still existed somewhere off camera on these trips. You girls gonna get wild? I asked, grinning, playing dumb. That always worked best with her. She laughed again. Louder this time, almost theatrical. God no. We're 30 years past wild. It's just wine and spa time. Maybe a rom-com if we make it to midnight. The car engine hummed to life. She adjusted the rearview mirror even though it hadn't moved. Her hand lingered on the gear shift. Then she looked at me for real this time, direct eye contact, 5 seconds too long. And there it was. That flicker. Not guilt. Not sadness. Something else. Something mechanical. Like she was checking to see if the act had worked. I waved. She waved. Then she pulled out of the driveway. I stood there for another full minute. The breeze picked up, carrying the smell of fresh mulch from the neighbor's yard. I stared at the street where her car had turned the corner. Then at the silence she left behind. Something buzzed in my gut. Not loud. Just an itch. I went inside. She'd left a coffee mug in the sink. Lipstick smeared on the edge. Red. She never wore red anymore. Except, apparently she still packed it. It was close to midnight when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I'd been sitting there for over an hour, lights dimmed, pretending to watch a baseball recap I didn't care about. I hadn't even poured myself a drink yet, which says a lot. That little buzz, that innocent ding, broke the silence like a gunshot. Look what Mom sent me, lol. It was from Lily, our daughter. 24. Smart, sharp as hell, lives in Philly now. We don't text much unless it's birthdays or the occasional meme I don't quite understand. But her message had a video attached. 15 seconds. No caption. No context. Just that fake laugh lol at the end that young people use like punctuation. I pressed play. The image loaded slow. Weak signal in the kitchen, or maybe the universe was just dragging it out for dramatic effect. First frame, hotel bed. White comforter, a half-eaten tray of room service. Fancy-looking stuff. Not the takeout sushi she and Amanda used to get when they traveled together. This was linen napkins and silver lids. Champagne flutes. One was half full. The other, lipstick-stained rim. Red. Then the camera panned. Someone, presumably her, giggled. That high-pitched fake giggle I hadn't heard in years. The one she used to turn on for bosses or cashiers or anyone she wanted to impress. And then him. You didn't see his face. Just a hand, large, hairy, maybe mid-40s. Flicking a grape at her. Another laugh. Male this time. Deep. Southern twang. Casual. Too damn familiar. "Ah, come on now," he drawled. "You're gonna spill that all over the bed again." Then a sudden jolt. The camera dipped as if she dropped the phone. She gasped, laughed again, whispered something muffled like, "Stop it." But not in a way you say to a girlfriend. The video cut out. 15 seconds. That's all it took. I didn't move for a solid minute. Just sat there, phone in hand, heart somewhere near my feet. No rage. Not yet. Just confusion. Like my brain was doing mental gymnastics trying to make it make sense. Maybe Amanda's husband dropped in? Maybe the waiter got chatty? I rewound, played it again, turned up the volume. I knew that voice. Not the exact name, not the face, but I knew it. You don't live in the same town for 30 years without learning how people sound. And that laugh of hers? That wasn't a girl's trip laugh. That was a get your bra off laugh. I paused the frame on the hand, zoomed in. There, just under the cuff, a tacky leather bracelet. Worn, scratched, braided. I'd seen it before, couldn't place it yet. But it rang a bell. My thumb hovered over the text reply. Did she mean to send this to you? I typed, then deleted it. Instead, I poured myself that drink. Neat, no ice. Then I hit play again. Sleep never even tried to show up. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the drywall, listening to the same 15-second video on loop like it was a voicemail from hell. The man's voice, her giggle, that dumb line about spilling champagne. Over and over. I wasn't even angry yet. It was worse than that. I was aware, hyper-aware, like my brain had finally decided to stop giving her the benefit of the doubt and instead start pulling threads. And brother, there were so many threads. Around 3 a.m., I got up. No lights. Just shuffled barefoot to my office, shut the door behind me, and dropped into the chair. I should have been tired. My body was, but my brain, no. My brain was in the damn CIA. I opened the video on my laptop, boosted the audio, took out my cheap little podcast mic I'd used once back in 2020 and rigged up a basic editing setup. Nothing fancy, just enough to isolate the background voice. And once I filtered out her idiotic giggling and the hotel AC hum, it got clearer. Ah, come on now. The drawl. That lazy southern lilt that says, I've never worked a full day in my life, but people still like me anyway. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some random bartender or fellow traveler or hotel concierge. It was someone local. That accent, it wasn't from out of town. It was ours. I played it again and again. I closed my eyes, let it wash over me, tried to connect it to anyone from the last 10, 15 years. I started flipping through mental images like mugshots. It wasn't our neighbor. He's from Wisconsin. Not her yoga instructor, she's got a New York rasp. Not the guy from our HOA board, that dude sounds like a wet sponge. But this voice, I'd heard it. Once at a barbecue maybe. One of those pointless holiday parties she dragged me to because you never socialize anymore. And then it hit me. 3 summers ago. 4th of July. She made us go to a cookout at the Whitmans. Real estate people. Fake smiles. Overcooked burgers. Everyone wearing red, white, and blue like it was a contest. There was a guy there. Slick smile, too tan. Drove a truck that was too clean for actual work. Said something like, "Your wife's got a great laugh, Dan." Lucky man. I remember I didn't like him. Didn't know why. Just felt off. The way he looked at her. Like he already knew something about her I didn't. Couldn't remember his name. But I remembered the bracelet. Braided leather. Worn on the left wrist. Same damn one I saw in the video. I didn't move. Just stared at the paused frame. That hand mid-grape flick. That stupid champagne glass. My mind was trying to spin out. Connect dots too fast. I didn't have enough yet. Just impressions, ghosts, crumbs. But I knew. I knew it was someone from here. Someone who'd shaken my hand. Probably laughed at one of my grill jokes. Maybe even stood in my garage once, looking at my tool bench, pretending to care. And her? She let him film it. Sent it to our daughter. Either by mistake, or by some subconscious need to be caught. But I didn't text Lily. Didn't ask follow-ups. Didn't call my wife. No, I just stared at the screen. Let the paranoia seep in slow, like ink in water. She thinks I'm asleep right now. Probably curled up next to Mr. Bracelet in some hotel suite with an overpriced minibar and plush robes. That's good. Let her rest. Let her think her lie landed. Because now I'm wide awake. The next morning came like a slow leak. Not a sunrise, not a fresh start, just a dull drip of reality seeping through the drywall of my skull. I brewed coffee I didn't want, stood in the kitchen watching it bubble like something was supposed to happen when the pot finished. Nothing did. I sat down at the table, same spot I always sat, and waited like I was in a dentist's office for the ache to begin. But the ache never came. Just that low, even hum behind the ribs. Like my body was conserving energy for something bigger. Phone rang around 9:12. Her ringtone, that chirpy marimba tone she picked for herself, said it sounded cheerful. It sounded like a damn clown funeral now. I picked up on the third ring. Not too fast. Not too slow. Casual. "Hey babe," she chirped. Too bright. Like she rehearsed it in the mirror before dialing. "Morning," I said. Just flat enough to register. Just warm enough to be believable. "You land okay?" Yeah. Got in last night. The flight was a little bumpy, but we're all good. Got to the hotel, ordered too much food. You know how it goes with the girls. The girls, right? Amanda and whoever else she'd name if I pressed. I didn't. "How's Amanda?" I asked, like I was trying to sound interested while scrolling headlines. That's when it happened. The pause. It was so short you'd miss it if you weren't listening for it. But I was listening. I was counting her breaths, measuring the air between her words like it was court testimony. "Oh, she's great," she said, voice too fast now. "You know her. Already halfway through a bottle of Chardonnay, and it's not even noon." She laughed, loud and shrill, like she needed to fill the silence with anything but the truth. My grip tightened on the coffee mug. I imagined it cracking in my hand. But outside, I didn't flinch. "Sounds like fun," I said. "Oh, it is. We're just relaxing today, maybe hit the spa later, maybe do some shopping. Nothing wild. Nothing wild, right? Just champagne and grape-flicking forearms." "That's good," I murmured. "You deserve a break." She softened, like my approval was a drug she still needed to shoot up her arm to keep the high going. "I miss you," she said, like a reflex, like something she knew she was supposed to say but hadn't thought about since her heels hit the hotel floor. I leaned back in the chair, watched a squirrel run across the back fence. "Miss you too." There was a beat of silence between us. She was waiting for me to say something else. Maybe to ask about her plans. Maybe to say I loved her. I didn't. "Well," she said finally, "we're about to go grab brunch, so I should run." "Sure. Tell Amanda I said hi." Another pause. A beat too long again. "Will do." Click. I stared at the screen. Call lasted 3 minutes, 11 seconds. In that time, I heard 2 lies, 3 stutters, and enough fake laughter to fill a sitcom track. I didn't need proof anymore. I had the soundtrack, and the actress was bombing her lines. It came just after lunch, right as I was scraping leftover pasta into the trash and pretending I gave a damn about anything but the noise in my head. The sun was high, birds chirping like idiots, and there I was, a 58-year-old man watching marinara slide down porcelain, thinking about whether my wife packed lingerie on her girls' trip. Ding. Another text from Lily. "I think Mom sent this to me by accident?" That question mark hit harder than it should have. Like she wasn't even sure if she wanted to know the answer. Like she knew something was off but didn't have the stomach to admit it. I tapped the video without thinking, already bracing for whatever flavor of betrayal was on the menu this time. First frame, dashboard. A shaky shot from a phone resting somewhere low, like it was wedged between a purse and the cup holder. The camera angle was tilted up just enough to show the passenger seat. My wife. Hair done, sunglasses on again, indoors this time. That fake smile stretched tight across her face like she'd been pulled out of a photo shoot and into someone else's reality. She was laughing at something we couldn't hear. The audio was muffled, distorted by the car noise and whatever music was playing. And then the driver spoke. Clear. Local. That voice again. Same southern drawl. Same relaxed arrogance. "I told you we're not going to make it if you keep distracting me like that," he said with a chuckle that had ownership in it. The camera adjusted just enough to show his arm reaching across the center console. Just casually, like this was nothing new. and then his hand rested on her knee. Just for a second. But long enough. Long enough that my brain didn't have to guess anymore. She didn't flinch. She didn't push him away. She didn't look uncomfortable. She looked home. Then the video glitched. Froze for half a beat. The screen went black. That was it. 15 seconds, again. Just enough to make sure I wouldn't sleep tonight either. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone like it was radioactive. I felt the cold work its way from my chest to my fingertips. Not rage. Not yet. Just precision. Like a scalpel being sharpened. I read the text again. I think Mom sent this to me by accident? Accident, my ass. This was either a screw-up or a slow-motion cry for help from someone too deep in their own mess to stop making it. I didn't respond. Not yet. I just stared at her words. Imagined Lily watching the video on her end. Imagined her trying to process what it meant. Her mom. The strange man. Intimacy caught on camera like it was just another Sunday errand. And then, Lily, 1:12 p.m., is everything okay? I stared at those 4 words for a full minute. Not what's going on. Not do you know about this? Just that safe, diplomatic question you ask when you're hoping the answer is no so you can keep pretending everything's fine. Me, 1:13 p.m., yeah. Everything's crystal. Because it was. And she didn't need to know what that meant yet. There's a moment, right after the disgust calcifies into something harder, when a man decides to stop asking why and starts asking how deep. That was me, sitting at my desk with a half-warm cup of black coffee and a browser window open to the Marriott Bonvoy login page. She never changed her password. Still the same one she used for Netflix and everything else. Italy 2012. Our honeymoon anniversary year. Cute. I typed it in slowly, like it might explode. Click. Logged in. There it was. 2 nights. Downtown boutique location. King Suite. Booked a week before her spontaneous girls' trip. The itinerary was clean, corporate-looking, until you started reading between the lines. Under guest preferences, someone had requested quiet corner room, top floor, no connecting doors. That's not girls' trip behavior. That's affair logistics. I scrolled down. Room for 2. Noted explicitly. Not a double queen. A single king. Champagne on arrival, $72 charge. No promo. No discount. Just indulgent. There was no Amanda on the second guest line. In fact, there was no second name at all. Just hers. Just her, pretending no one else existed. Or maybe knowing someone would never check. Except I just had. I hit print. The printer clunked awake. Like even it was too tired to deal with this crap. The page slid out warm and damning. I read it twice. The check-in time matched the timestamp on the first video Lily sent. The room number matched the hotel she claimed had terrible cell service. Right. I folded the receipt once. Clean, sharp edge. Then again. Slid it into the top drawer of my desk. Underneath the stack of blank birthday cards I always meant to send to people I didn't care about. It felt appropriate. I didn't shake. Didn't yell. Just stared at the drawer a little too long. Like I was sealing a time capsule. Or loading a weapon. She was still texting me like everything was fine. Sent a photo of some salad she said was to die for. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it. That receipt wasn't just paper. It was permission. To stop pretending. To start preparing. She showed up late afternoon. Unannounced. I heard her car before I saw her. That little rattle in the muffler she keeps saying she'll fix but never does. I was in the garage. Pretending to sort a toolbox that didn't need sorting. When the door creaked open and Lily stood there like she'd just come in from a war zone. "Hey, Dad," she said, voice tight, like every word was walking on glass. She wasn't wearing makeup. She always wears makeup when she comes over. Said it was a respect thing. Like looking put together meant you were trying. Today she looked raw. Pale. Eyes puffy. She'd been crying. Not freshly but recently enough. I didn't say a word. Just nodded toward the folding chair next to the workbench. She sat. I kept working. Or pretending to. The silence stretched between us. Heavy and brittle. I could feel her shifting. Twisting her fingers in her lap. That same nervous habit she had as a kid whenever she broke something and didn't want to confess. "You okay?" she asked finally. I kept my eyes on the wrench in my hand. "I'm fine." She nodded like she expected that. Like it wasn't even the answer she wanted, just the one she knew she'd get. Another long silence. "Dad, about the video," she said, her voice soft, guilt already bleeding through every syllable. I didn't look at her. I wasn't sure if I should send it. I didn't know what it meant. Not really. And then the second one. Still silent. I let the wrench clink softly into the drawer. Closed it with the kind of precision that says I'm not angry. I'm focused. She swallowed hard. Her voice cracked when she kept going. "I thought maybe you knew. Or maybe you were okay with it. I don't know. Maybe it was some weird arrangement you guys had or—" That's when I turned and looked at her. Not a glare. Not even disappointment. Just that long, flat stare fathers reserve for the exact moment they realize their daughter stopped being a child and started learning to lie like her mother. She crumbled. "I didn't want to be involved," she said, voice rising, eyes glassing over. "I didn't want to be the reason this all blew up. I thought if I didn't say anything it would go away, or it wasn't my business, or she'd fix it." "Lily," I said, finally cutting in. My voice was calm, almost quiet. "Who's the man?" She froze, opened her mouth, closed it again. "I don't know," she said, and I believed her. She never said a name. She was just acting weird, flirty, different. And then she sent those clips like it was nothing. Like maybe I'd find it funny, or, I don't know. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "You think she meant to send them to you?" Her breath caught. "I don't know," she whispered. "Part of me thinks she did. Like she wanted me to see it. Like she wanted someone to stop her but didn't know how to ask." We sat in silence again. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "I'm sorry, Dad." I nodded. No forgiveness. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. She stood. "Do you want me to stay?" No. It wasn't cold. It was just the truth. I needed the quiet. I needed the walls back up before they saw me crack. She hesitated in the doorway. "You're not going to do anything crazy, right?" I gave her a faint smile. Define crazy. She didn't smile back, just nodded and walked out. The door closed. The family rot had started. Quiet. Underneath everything. Just like mold behind drywall. And now it was blooming. The first call came at 8:17 a.m. I watched it light up the screen from across the kitchen. Karen Kiss, in stupid, cutesy letters I'd never bothered changing, because it wasn't worth the energy. The phone buzzed twice, then went silent. I didn't move, just sipped my coffee slow, savoring the warmth like it was the only thing I trusted in the house. The second call came 12 minutes later. Then a text. "Good morning, babe. Just woke up. What are you doing today?" No punctuation on the last sentence. Classic her. Trying to sound breezy, low maintenance, like she wasn't the human equivalent of a smoke alarm going off in a locked cabinet. I placed the phone face down on the table, finished my coffee, and left it there. No charger. No be right back text. Just silence. She'd feel it. After 27 years of marriage, you know how to pull a trigger without making a sound. I loaded the gear into the truck like I had somewhere to be. I hadn't touched my tackle box in months. Maybe a year. The hooks were rusted. The lures still smelled like lake rot. And the line was tangled in a way that would have driven me nuts 5 years ago. Today, felt right. Felt honest. I drove out past Miller's Ridge, took the long route through the state road, windows down, radio off. Just the sound of wind and tires on asphalt. It was the kind of silence that settles into your bones, like a recalibration. No buzz of notifications. No artificial intimacy. Just me. The lake was quiet when I got there. No other trucks. No early risers. Just the water, calm and glassy, reflecting the kind of stillness I hadn't felt in weeks. I slid the boat into the water, rowed out slow, and let myself drift. She called again at 9:41. The screen on my truck lit up when I went back to grab the thermos. The last message was a photo, some overpriced eggs Benedict and a mimosa, captioned, "Brunch. Wish you were here, heart smile." It was so performative I almost laughed. She was still trying to hold the mask up, unaware the audience had left the theater days ago. I spent 6 hours on that lake. Didn't cast a single line. Just drifted. Thought. The water slapped softly against the hull. Occasionally a bird would scream overhead. But mostly it was just me and the weight of nothing, which, ironically, felt heavier than everything. I imagined her pacing in that overpriced hotel robe, checking her phone, wondering why I hadn't replied. She'd cycle through theories. Maybe I was busy. Maybe I was mad about something trivial. Maybe I'd finally snapped. And for the first time in this whole circus, I was in control. At 1:12 p.m., another call. Then again at 1:44. One at 2:30. Then finally, "Are you getting these? Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because it was the only thing she couldn't manipulate. The silence. It was her worst nightmare. Not yelling, not confrontation. Being ignored. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, dusk had started to crawl across the lawn. The porch light kicked on automatically. I grabbed the tackle box, left it on the bench, and checked the phone. 7 missed calls. For texts. 1 voice message I didn't bother listening to. The queen was starting to feel the draft in her castle. Good. Let her. The tires crunched up the driveway at exactly 6:43 p.m. Not a minute early, not a minute late. Like she'd rehearsed the timing to align perfectly with whatever twisted idea of normal she thought we still had. I watched from the living room, lights dimmed, beer in hand, porch light casting long shadows across the hardwood. Her silhouette stepped out of the SUV with that peppy little travel bounce she always exaggerated after trips. As if a weekend away with the girls rejuvenated her, not drained the color from her soul. She opened the front door with a casual, "Honey, I'm home." Like this was a sitcom and not a funeral procession for our marriage. I stayed seated. She breezed in, wheeling her suitcase like it was full of spa robes and wine memories instead of used betrayal and the lingering scent of another man's cologne. She spotted me on the couch and smiled like we hadn't both just survived 2 separate psychological wars. "There's my favorite husband," she said, dropping the suitcase by the stairs. I smiled back, cool, unshaken. My heart didn't race. It slowed. "Made you a drink," I said, gesturing toward the kitchen bar. "Figured you'd want one after your wild weekend." Her eyes flicked toward the glass, neat, amber, expensive. I'd used the good stuff. She noticed. She always did when something felt off. She hesitated just long enough for me to see it. A half-second stall in her return-to-normal routine. Then the gears spun back up. "You're the best," she chirped, walking over and wrapping her arms around me like it was date night and not the last chapter of her act. I hugged her back. Firm. Controlled. The kind of hug a man gives when he's holding up the walls of his own damn house. She pulled back, took the glass, sipped, smiled again but softer now. Nervous, like something in the temperature had changed and she couldn't quite figure out where the draft was coming from. "You okay?" she asked. "Sit down," I said, calm, almost bored. "We need to talk about something." The color didn't drain all at once. It shifted, just a slight fade in her cheeks, like the blood inside her was deciding whether to flee or fight. She sat at the edge of the couch like it was a job interview, legs crossed, back stiff. Not relaxed. Not anymore. She placed the drink on the coffee table and folded her hands in her lap. I watched her eyes scan the room like it might offer her clues. Something missing. Something new. Something that told her how much I knew. "Is everything okay?" she asked, and her voice had this sugar shell to it. Not real concern. Just that carefully wrapped tone women use when they sense a man's about to show them the mirror. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on my knees, met her eyes. "You tell me." A flicker. A full-body flicker. Her shoulders tensed. She tried to smile again, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did something happen?" she asked. "Oh, something happened," I said. "I just want to see if you're still sticking to the script." She laughed. Tight. A breathy little exhale that wanted to sound amused but landed somewhere between cornered and calculating. "What are you talking about?" I leaned back, sipped my beer, let the silence crawl between us like a slow, deliberate animal. Her fingers twitched once. She reached for the drink again. This time she didn't sip. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how bad it was going to get. She was mid-sip when I picked up the remote. Didn't say a word. Just clicked it on, slow and methodical, like I was about to start a movie we'd seen a dozen times. Except this time she was the lead actress, and the genre had changed from romantic comedy to psychological horror. The TV blinked to life. Black screen. Then the dashboard. Her face. That stupid laugh. The grainy, tilted shot of her in the passenger seat. Sunlight slicing across her oversized sunglasses like a cheap disguise. The camera wobbled slightly as it settled. The room went dead quiet. Even the ice in her glass stopped shifting. Then came the voice. Told you, we're not gonna make it if you keep distracting me like that. That voice. Smooth, confident, intimate. Then the hand. His hand. That lazy, familiar, possessive reach across the console. Palm resting lightly on her knee, like this was a regular occurrence. Like her skin had never belonged to anyone else. And her? She laughed. Not a friend laugh. Not a girl's trip giggle. A lover's laugh. The kind you let out when you're not just cheating on someone's body, you're cheating on their belief in who you are. I didn't look at her. Just sipped my beer as the 15 seconds looped. The TV casting a flickering glow across her frozen face. Her voice finally broke the silence. Small. Distant. Where did you get that? I turned to her finally. Her face was pale. Eyes locked on the screen like it might suddenly offer her an exit door. That's you, right? I asked flatly. Or do I need to get my eyes checked? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then she looked away, like the couch cushion might give her a better answer. Dan. It's not what it looks like. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned back into the couch and exhaled slowly, like I was just trying to process a disappointing weather forecast. Okay, I said, nodding. Then tell me what it is. She hesitated. It was stupid. We were drinking. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't serious. Stop. I raised one hand like I was directing traffic. She froze. I didn't ask for your monologue. I asked for your truth. She went quiet. The video looped again. His voice again. That easy, cocky chuckle. Her laugh again. This time, it made my stomach turn. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I turned toward her. Really looked at her. Which part? I asked. The weekend trip? The hotel suite? The hand on your knee? Or accidentally sending the video to our daughter? That one hit. She winced like I'd thrown something. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was doing the math, trying to decide if there was a version of this story where she still came out human. I don't know why I sent it, she said finally. Maybe I wanted it out. I don't know. I've been unhappy for a long time and you decided to fix it with room service and foreplay? She flinched. I stood up slowly, walked over to the bar, poured myself another 2 fingers of bourbon. You want another drink? I asked without looking back. No answer. I turned around, glass in hand. She was still staring at the TV. And now, she looked afraid. She was still trying to cry without crying. That quiet kind of tremble women learn when they've spent years fine-tuning the line between guilt and self-preservation. No tears, but her breath kept hitching, eyes wet but not falling. She wanted to seem shattered, but salvageable. I let her sit in that. Let her watch the TV screen fade back to black while the memory of her voice, her giggle, still echoed off the living room walls like some cursed ringtone. I took another sip, then stood up. Didn't rush. Didn't say a word. Just walked past her. My footsteps soft on the wood floor like I was headed to the fridge for milk. But I didn't open the fridge. I picked up the landline. She turned her head slightly, clocking the movement, sensing the shift. I could feel her breath stop as I pressed a button and hit speaker. She sat up straighter. Dan, she said softly. What are you? The ringing tone answered her. Once, twice, 3. Law offices of Kendrick and Mills. This is Dana speaking. How can I help you? I stared at the counter. Steady voice. No shakiness. I could have been ordering pizza. Hi, Dana, I said, calm as a glacier. I need to schedule a consultation. Divorce attorney. I watched it hit her. It wasn't cinematic. There was no dramatic scream, no dropped glass. Just the slow draining of blood from her face. Like someone pulled a plug in her skull and all the color went with it. Her jaw slackened. Her hand. The same one I'd seen in every family Christmas card for 27 years. reached slightly toward me, then stopped mid-air, as if even her instincts didn't believe she had the right anymore. Dana on the phone. We can do a phone consultation this week, or in person next Monday. Do you have a preference? In person, I said. Monday's fine. Morning or afternoon? I glanced at the clock. Afternoon. All right, I've got you down for 2 p.m. with Mr. Kendrick. Is there anything else you need from us ahead of time? I stared straight at my wife as I answered. No, I think I've got everything I need. She finally found her voice, just as I pressed the button to end the call. Dan, please. I raised my hand. No, tears now. Real ones. Her voice cracked. This doesn't have to be. Save it, I said. You made the call. I'm just returning it. I wasn't thinking. I was lonely. You've been so. I stepped closer. Not fast. Not threatening. Just close enough for her to see that I meant every word. You don't get to explain this away like it was a Target receipt. You sent our daughter a sex souvenir. You lied to my face for God knows how long. And you laughed while doing it. She covered her mouth with both hands, finally understanding the moment wasn't slipping away. It had already gone. You can't just walk away from 27 years, she choked out. I leaned down, voice like a knife. I didn't. You did. I'm just turning off the lights behind you. Then I turned and left the room. She didn't follow. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, like the air had been sucked out of the house and left only the sound of her sobbing. Hunched over in the living room where she once played hostess and wife like it was a role she was born to fill. Now she was just a woman sitting in the ruins of her own production. Mascara bleeding down cheeks she used to hold high. I didn't look at her. Just stood at the kitchen window, watching the dusk roll in over the neighbor's lawn. The same house where we once grilled burgers with them on Labor Day like some all-American cliché. Back when I thought the biggest threat to our family was cholesterol. I didn't hear Lily pull into the driveway, just the soft creak of the door opening behind me. She stepped inside, slow and unsure, and paused when she saw the shape of her mother crumpled on the couch. For a moment, none of us spoke. Just the hum of the fridge, the clock ticking. Then Lily said, quiet but crystal, Mom, you need to leave. No drama, no screaming, just a fact. Karen looked up. Her face was red, eyes puffy, lips trembling like she might beg again. But she saw Lily's eyes, saw there was no negotiation left. But, sweetie, don't. The word cut through the air like a blade. Lily's voice didn't wobble. She didn't cry. She just stood there, arms crossed, a foot inside the house like she was defending the last stable square on a collapsing board. I'm staying here, she said, turning toward me. Her voice softened. If that's okay. I didn't answer, just nodded once and stepped to the bar. Poured one last drink, the same bourbon, the same glass, same 2 fingers of bitter fire. I didn't raise it, didn't toast, just held it in my hand like it was an old friend who showed up on the worst day of your life and didn't need to say anything. Karen slowly stood. Her movements were robotic now, like her strings had been cut and she was learning how to walk all over again. She looked at me like she still hoped I'd say something, that I'd rescue her from herself. That I'd somehow roll back the clock to Friday morning and pretend we were just 2 people pretending again. But I said nothing. She picked up her suitcase, rolled it toward the door, stopped briefly in front of Lily, reached out like she might touch her shoulder. Lily stepped back. Karen's lips parted, but she didn't speak. What could she say? Sorry for shattering the only family structure that still made sense? Sorry for dragging us all into your midlife melodrama with some bracelet-wearing bastard from a backyard barbecue? Instead, she walked out. The door closed, and just like that, she was gone. Lily sat on the armrest of the couch, quiet, looking down at her hands. I didn't ask her how she was doing, didn't try to fix it. We weren't ready for words yet. I sat in my chair, took one sip, let it burn all the way down. The house didn't feel peaceful, but it felt clean, and for now that was enough.
She pushed the door open with her shoulder, heels dangling from one hand, the other still half scrolling through her texts. Her lipstick was half faded, hair a tousled mess that she thought looked bohemian, but screamed 3 vodkas too many. It was for 17 a.m. She didn't care. She was humming Dancing with Myself, which she thought was ironic and clever, and she had already prepped a line in her head for Martin in case he was awake, something breezy and dismissive, like, "Don't worry, babe, just a girls' night that turned into sunrise." But Martin didn't ask where she'd been, because he didn't need to. The second she flicked the living room light switch, everything snapped. He was sitting there, not asleep, not even pretending, elbows on his knees, calm, still in the sweater she'd gotten him last Christmas out of obligation. He was holding a glass of water in his left hand, 2 fingers around the rim, the way he always did when he was waiting for someone to lie. And beside him, legs crossed, sat a woman Melissa hadn't seen in 10 years. But she remembered. Oh, she remembered. And that smile on her face, the smug one she'd carried all the way up the porch, that "I got away with it" smirk, died instantly. Her mouth opened slightly, like it had forgotten how to form words. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. The silence wasn't just awkward. It was engineered. Thick. Surgical. Martin didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had rewatched this exact scene play out in his head 100 times. "Melissa," he said, tilting his head slightly, "we've been waiting." She blinked. Once. Twice. "Wah." He gestured toward the armchair, across from the couch. "Go on. You look tired. Why don't you sit?" Melissa didn't move. Her legs didn't want to. Her knees locked the way they did the night her boss told her she was too ambitious for the partnership track. Like her body knew instinctively, "You're not in charge here anymore." The woman beside Martin, Olivia, finally looked up. Calm. No venom in her eyes. Just a steady, unnerving stillness. Like someone who'd already cried years ago and now just watched the wreckage with cold detachment. "You remember Olivia, don't you?" Martin's voice had no sharpness, no sarcasm, which somehow made it worse. Like he didn't need it. Like the truth was heavy enough. Melissa's throat clicked. Of course, Been a while," Olivia said softly, setting down a small leather folder she'd had on her lap. "Last time we talked, you were telling everyone I ruined your engagement. Funny how that works." Melissa's hand tightened on the heel strap. She still hadn't taken a step into the room. "This is insane. Why is she?" "I wanted you to see her," Martin cut in. "Because it's poetic, really. You tried to erase her back then. Rewrite what happened. Told everyone she was unstable. Desperate. That she made it up." "She did," Melissa's voice cracked. Martin raised one hand slowly. "Melissa, stop." And she did. Not because he was loud. Not because she was scared of him. But because there was a very specific calm in his voice that made her realize something terrifying. He wasn't discovering anything tonight. He already knew. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a presentation. "I didn't come here for revenge," Olivia said, leaning forward just enough to cast a longer shadow across the carpet. "That was a long time ago. I moved on. Built a life. I'm only here now because your husband called me." Melissa's chest tightened. "You, what?" Martin leaned back, finally taking a sip of the water. 3 months ago. After the hotel in Stamford. The florist in Miami. The sudden 3-day conference in Austin even though the itinerary said Dallas. Melissa flinched. The waterline in her eyes surged. But nothing came out. "And you know what, Melissa?" he added, his voice lowering just slightly. "It didn't hurt. That part. I expected it. But the part that got me?" He turned his eyes slowly to Olivia. "It was realizing you used the same lines you used on me. You're just different. You make me feel alive. I wish I met you sooner." Word for word. Olivia didn't smile. Melissa's stomach twisted. Her head dropped slightly as if trying to hide under its own weight. "You don't understand." "No," Martin said quietly. "You don't." And the room went still again. Melissa took a shaky breath, stepped back once, hitting the doorframe with her heel. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wall behind her. "What do you want?" she whispered. Olivia tilted her head. "Oh, honey, this isn't about what we want." Martin stood. "It's about what you've already lost." Her heels hit the floor with a dull thud, one, then the other, as Melissa finally stepped fully into the room like a woman being called to the stand in her own trial. Her mouth opened, tried to form some version of a defense, but what came out was a breathy, trembling fragment of herself. "It wasn't serious," she muttered, eyes flicking between Martin and Olivia like a rabbit surrounded by statues that might suddenly pounce. It was stupid. Just a stupid mistake. Martin didn't even blink. She tried again, this time her voice pitching up into the same register she used when sweet-talking waiters after returning food she clearly didn't like. I swear to God, Martin. It didn't mean anything. Olivia leaned forward. Didn't mean anything? Her tone was neutral, too clean to be angry. Funny. That's not what you told me. Oh, wait. That's right. You told him I ruined your life. Melissa blinked, her lip twitching. What are you talking about? I remember it word for word, Olivia said, crossing her legs. You said I manipulated your fiancé, turned your friends against you. You said I was unstable, that I obsessed over men who didn't want me. You even told our coworkers I tried to sabotage your wedding because I couldn't stand to see you happy. Melissa's hand flew up in a reflexive gesture, as if swatting at invisible smoke. You're twisting everything. No, Martin said, his voice finally cutting through the air. She's not. Melissa froze. He placed the glass of water on the coffee table like a judge setting down his gavel. I've known for months. The words landed like a trapdoor opening beneath her feet. Melissa's lips parted slightly, but no sound followed. Her shoulders slumped an inch. He continued, his voice calm, mechanical, and terrifying in its stillness. I know about the hotel. The dinners in cities you never mentioned. I know about the Venmo transfers, small amounts, split bills, but always with the same initials. I know about the messages you deleted, after syncing your cloud to the iPad you forgot I still use. Her eyes widened. No, that's not what it. I know you used our anniversary dinner as an excuse to meet him at that rooftop lounge, Martin added. The one with the live jazz. You even kept the dress. Melissa's breath was coming in shallow bursts now. Her fingers had started to twitch, tapping against her thigh like she was searching for some anchor in a storm. I told you it wasn't serious, she snapped, louder now. It was just something stupid. I needed to feel something. Olivia let out a small exhale, almost a laugh. You needed to feel something? That's your line. Melissa turned sharply. You don't know me. Oh, I think I know you too well, Olivia replied. You haven't changed a bit. Same lies. Same theatrics. You always rehearse just enough to sound apologetic, but never enough to be believable. Stay out of this. Melissa snapped, eyes flaring. This is between me and my husband. Martin shook his head. No, Melissa. It stopped being just between us the moment you turned our marriage into an open mic night for your excuses. She staggered back like he'd slapped her. But why? Why did you bring her here? Her voice broke. You couldn't just confront me? You needed an audience. I didn't bring her here to humiliate you, Martin said. I brought her here so you'd finally hear the truth from someone who's already survived you. Melissa's hands curled into fists, but not out of anger, more like someone trying to hold onto the last scraps of a mask that was rapidly dissolving. You want to know the part one kept waiting for? Martin said, standing now, not looming, just present. The part where you said, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. Not for being stupid. Just sorry for me. For what you threw away. He looked at her for a moment, as if scanning for a trace of that person he once trusted. But that's not who you are, is it? Her jaw tightened. He stepped forward, picking up a small envelope from the mantel. This has copies of everything I've documented. Messages. Transactions. Photos. I've made backups. I'm not using them. Not yet. But you should know what I know before you tell your version of the story. Melissa's face turned pale. She took a half step back toward the door. And that's when Olivia said quietly, almost casually, you should probably cancel brunch with Dana tomorrow. She's known since Tuesday. She just pretended not to. Melissa turned sharply, horror blooming across her face. Martin watched her crumble in real time and didn't move an inch. It wasn't the lipstick on a collar. Melissa was too careful for that. Too polished, too curated. No, what tipped Martin off wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was silence. The silence when she got home later than usual and didn't ask about his day. The silence in the car when she stopped laughing at his terrible puns, the one she used to snort over at red lights. The silence of her wedding ring no longer clicking against her coffee mug in the morning. It started as a whisper of doubt. Martin didn't even want to call it suspicion at first. Just a disturbance in the rhythm they'd once had. A shift, so subtle that most men would have missed it. Most men probably had. But Martin wasn't most men. He noticed the way she angled her phone away when texting. The way her laugh was sharper when she scrolled through Instagram. eyes flicking down then glancing at him, as if expecting judgment or worse, recognition. Then she changed her passwords. That one made him pause. Melissa had always been careless with that sort of thing. Not because she trusted him so deeply, but because she simply never considered him a threat. He wasn't clever enough to snoop. Or maybe he was just beneath suspicion. Martin, dependable Martin, who handled the taxes and cleaned the gutters and remembered to get her favorite wine when it was on sale. So when he got the alert from the shared credit card, the one she forgot was still tied to an old subscription, he didn't get angry. Not even confused. Just cold. For $182 at a boutique hotel in Richmond, Virginia, and a $65 charge from a local florist, same zip code. Richmond, a city she once called a miserable pit, when he suggested a weekend trip there 4 years ago. She told him she was in Chicago that weekend. Conference. Something about innovation in HR. Martin didn't confront her. Not immediately. He made tea instead. Sat at the kitchen table with the receipt pulled up on his iPad. Zoomed in on the vendor line. Screenshot it. Saved it to a folder labeled taxes. Then he pulled out his contacts list and scrolled until he hit the name he hadn't touched in nearly a decade. Olivia Morales. He stared at it for a while. She had every reason to hang up on him. Maybe even scream. But she didn't. When she picked up, there was a pause, a long, hesitant inhale, and then a simple, cautious. Martin. He almost didn't know what to say. Until he did. I think we need to talk. About Melissa. And Olivia, to her credit, didn't gloat, didn't spit venom, just said, where should we start? What followed was a strange, quiet alliance between two people Melissa had discarded like cheap jewelry. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, Martin and Olivia built a timeline. Nothing wild. No cloak and dagger surveillance. Just receipts. Social media timestamps. An old florist contact Olivia still knew in Richmond who remembered Melissa's order, because, as she'd put it, nobody ever asked for orchids and baby's breath. Weird combo. Martin cross-referenced Melissa's travel calendar with her company's reimbursement statements. Half of them were fabricated. No one at her office had even heard of the offsite in Seattle she supposedly attended. The more he pulled, the more it unraveled. But he wasn't doing it to punish her. He was studying her. Carefully. Like an architect reverse engineering the collapse of a building he designed with his own hands. One night, Olivia sent him a short voice memo. No commentary, no introduction. Just Melissa's voice. Giggling. Whispering. Saying a line Martin had heard before, but not in that voice. Not with that warmth. You make me feel like I'm 20 again. I don't know how you do it. He played it once. Then again. Then deleted it. He didn't need the evidence anymore. The truth wasn't a question now. It was a map. And he knew exactly where it led. If Melissa had a superpower, it was vanishing guilt. She could scrub it from any room with a practiced flick of the wrist and a tight smile. She prided herself on her emotional efficiency. Cried just enough to be forgiven, never long enough to be held accountable. And 10 years ago, she used that superpower on Olivia. Back then, Olivia wasn't the woman on the couch. She was the woman, maid of honor, the kind of friend who dropped everything at midnight, who held Melissa's hair after too many margaritas and fixed her eyeliner before job interviews. Olivia knew every contour of Melissa's life. Until Melissa slept with her fiancé. The fallout was nuclear. Olivia's engagement disintegrated. Her reputation in their shared circle turned radioactive. And Melissa? She landed on her feet, as always, spinning the story until she was the misunderstood romantic who just followed her heart. Martin never fully understood that story. Just the bare bones of it. Melissa had cut ties with someone toxic, someone jealous. That was how she phrased it when Olivia's name came up. She was too intense. Needed me to be her emotional crutch. I couldn't do it anymore. Turns out, that was the first draft of a much longer manuscript. When Martin reached out, Olivia didn't hesitate long. She asked only one question. Are you sure? When he answered, calm, deliberate, yes. I'm done being the fool in my own life, she replied. Then let's begin. Their alliance didn't form with fire or fury. It was forged in silence. DMs, email threads, shared drives. Martin would send a folder labeled innocuously, contract _review, insurance 2022. things Melissa wouldn't blink at if she glanced over his shoulder. Inside, copies of synced messages she thought were wiped. iCloud backups she forgot were enabled. Notes from burner conversations in apps she used during business trips. Martin became forensic. Olivia became surgical. She recognized the names. The same ones Melissa had once sworn were harmless guys she met at client events. Turns out, they were recurring players, each following the same pattern. 3-week flirt, hotel meetup, sudden drop-off. Melissa had a rhythm, a strategy, and it wasn't random. It was rehearsed. I remember this one. Olivia texted one night at 2:14 a.m., attaching a photo of a man Melissa had once introduced as just a coworker. She slept with him when we were still friends. Said he was a career boost. Martin stared at the photo for a long time. That phrase kept ringing in his head. A career boost. Like a person was just a rung on a ladder. By the 4th week, they had a timeline. Not just of the current affair, but of all the others. 15 distinct encounters over 8 years. And that was just what they could prove. One file stood out, labeled Lakewood. Martin opened it and found a photo Melissa had taken during a weekend spa retreat. But Olivia recognized the room immediately. It was the honeymoon suite at a lodge she and her ex-fiancé had once booked. Melissa had stolen more than the man. She had taken the memory and repurposed it for someone else. Martin didn't say a word for nearly a full day after that. But when he finally did speak, it was to ask Olivia, "Can you be in town by the 14th? She didn't ask why. She just said, "Send me the address." And so they planned it. The meeting, the reveal, not with fireworks or shouting, but with calculation. A single moment, sharp enough to pierce the illusion Melissa still thought she controlled. Because that's what she never understood. Martin had always played the long game. And now, he wasn't playing alone. Melissa, still strutting through her world of brunches and filters and curated lies, had no idea that the person she'd once buried had just returned, not to hurt her, but to watch her bury herself. The invitation read like nothing special, just a quiet Saturday evening. Martin's handwriting, still neat despite the digital age, listed, dinner. Casual. Friends. 7 p.m. Melissa found the card on the counter the morning after the couch incident. She stared at it for a good minute before realizing he'd already sent it out. Already confirmed guests. Already printed place cards with tiny gold flourishes, something she used to do. She considered protesting. But how would that look? Canceling a dinner with their closest friends? Drawing attention when she needed calm? No, she told herself it was salvageable. A little charm, a little makeup, some tight-lipped smiles and passive-aggressive toasts, and she could turn the tide back in her favor. By 6:45, she was slicing prosciutto with the intensity of a woman building alibis. She'd chosen a new perfume, something she thought whispered reinvention, not desperation. Martin didn't comment on it. Just uncorked a bottle of red and hummed some old blues tune as he set the table. Guests arrived in waves. Mark and Helen, the couple from next door with too many opinions and too little self-awareness. Lena, Melissa's coworker, who never knew when to shut up but always knew who was sleeping with whom. And then, precisely at 7:04, Olivia, dressed in black. Simple, sleek, and not the least bit apologetic. She brought a lemon tart and a bottle of wine Martin used to save for special occasions. Melissa caught sight of the label and nearly dropped a glass. She tried to stay gracious. She did the kisses on the cheek, the hostess giggle, the practiced warmth. But Olivia? She didn't match the performance. She didn't overcompensate or fake familiarity. She just was. Present. Poised. Quiet in a way that made Melissa's teeth clench. Dinner started smooth. Conversation bounced from vacation horror stories to Lena's latest dating debacle to Helen's unsolicited colonoscopy update. Laughter rose, drinks flowed. Martin played the affable host, clearing plates with efficiency, pouring seconds before anyone could ask. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, when the candles had melted halfway and the room was warm from bodies and wine, Olivia spoke. She was swirling her drink, not even looking at Melissa. "You know," she said casually, "it's funny what you remember during an affair." The table quieted slightly. Not a hush, just the subtlest collective inhale. "I once forgave a man who didn't deserve it," she continued, her voice soft, even thoughtful. "He said it was a mistake. One-time thing. But it wasn't. It was a pattern. I just didn't want to see it. Melissa's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Olivia sipped. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how many people knew. How many looked away. Or worse, pretended not to. Martin didn't move. Didn't nod. Just kept his eyes on the roast, cutting it with surgical calm. Lena tried to chuckle, lightening the mood. Geez, Liv, this got dark fast. Olivia smiled politely. Did it? Or did it just get honest? No one answered. Melissa set her fork down slowly, as if it were suddenly heavier than she could manage. Her pulse ticked in her throat. She could feel the walls shift, subtly, but undeniably. These were people she'd known for years. People she controlled. Dominated, even. And yet now, they were leaning ever so slightly away from her. Looking toward Olivia when she spoke. Letting Martin refill their glasses instead of her. The air had changed. Mark, the neighbor, tried to pivot. Well, I always say marriage is just two people agreeing not to kill each other. Awkward chuckles. But it was too late. The crack had spread. Melissa stared at Olivia, trying to calculate how much she knew, how deep this was going. But Olivia didn't meet her gaze. She didn't need to, because the silence spoke louder now. And for the first time in years, Melissa wasn't sure which script she was in. She only knew this. She wasn't the one writing it anymore. It started small. A declined Apple Pay at her usual coffee spot. The barista, a fresh-faced college kid with too much cheer at 7:30 a.m., gave her a pity smile. Maybe try a different card? She forced a laugh. Must be the Wi-Fi. But when her backup card chirped the same red denial, her hand twitched. She left the latte, eyes darting, trying not to let the burn show. By 9:15, Melissa was sitting in her Audi outside the office, jabbing at her banking app like it owed her something. 3 accounts, checking, savings, business, each flashing the same cheerful insult. Unavailable at this time. By 9:20, she wasn't sitting anymore. She was marching. Through the company lot. Past the front desk. Straight toward her office like a woman whose leash had just snapped. Except her key card didn't work. She swiped it again. Red. She tried the backup one in her purse. Red. Morning, Melissa, chirped the new receptionist. Oh, I think you're supposed to check in with HR first. Excuse me. They said to let them know when you arrived, something about a change in. Melissa was already halfway down the hall. Her office door was unlocked. That was the first clue. The second? The box on her desk. A box. Like she was just some middle manager packing up a stapler and a fern. She stormed back out. By 9:31, she was in the kitchen of her own damn home, slamming her purse on the island, keys rattling like gunfire. Martin, what the hell is going on? He didn't even look up from the skillet. Just turned a sausage link with slow, precise care and said, "You might want to check who owns your company now." Her laugh was dry and immediate. Don't be ridiculous. You think you can just, take it? He finally looked at her. Melissa, sit down. She didn't. But she did pull out her phone again. Opened the internal directory app. Scrolled. Clicked executive team. Her name was gone. CFO. Vacant. She blinked. Switched apps. Pulled up her LinkedIn. Still there. Pulled up the SEC registry. Not there. Her breath hitched. She looked up slowly. What did you do? I cleaned up some paperwork, Martin said, now buttering toast like they were discussing paint samples. The holding company you used to buy your stake in the firm? You forgot I helped you set it up. My name was still on the founding documents. That doesn't mean. It means, he said flatly, I had voting rights. And you used company funds for personal expenses. You broke your own compliance policy. I paid those back. Too late. The audit committee didn't think so. She stepped back, as if his words were physical. The board voted, he said. Last Friday. I didn't even have to be there. Her voice was trembling now, volume rising. You can't do this. Oh, I didn't do anything. I just let the numbers speak. You were too busy playing Goddess of the Gallus circuit to notice your books were bleeding. She lunged for her laptop on the sideboard. It wouldn't start. It's disabled, he said. Company property. You bastard. He turned then. Calm. Steady. No, Melissa. You're not angry because I'm a bastard. You're angry because I was quiet. Because I let you believe, for months, that you were ahead of me. Her chest heaved. He folded his napkin. You used to tell me I was boring, he said. That I lacked ambition. He looked around at the kitchen. The open concept she'd insisted on. The wine fridge. The smart fridge she never learned how to program. "Well," he said, voice quiet now, "looks like I've finally surprised you." Melissa staggered backward. Everything she'd built, her title, her status, her curated identity, was slipping. And worse than the financial gut punch was the realization that it had all been legal. All by the book. He hadn't destroyed her. She'd left the blueprints lying around. And he'd simply read them. The knock on the door that Saturday morning was soft, hesitant, almost polite. Melissa opened it with a rehearsed smile, the kind that came with second chances and well-timed tears. She hadn't seen Allison in 3 weeks, not since the dinner party where something had felt off. Her daughter had barely made eye contact then. And now? "Hi, sweetie," Melissa said, voice feathered with warmth. Allison stepped in with a tight smile. Her usual hug, a fierce, two-armed squeeze, was replaced by a one-arm, purse still on shoulder lean-in. It was subtle, but devastating. Melissa noticed immediately. "You look tired," Allison said, setting her bag down in the hallway. "Rough week. Just glad you're here." Allison nodded, but didn't say same here. Instead, she glanced toward the kitchen. "Is Dad home?" Melissa hesitated. "He's around." As if summoned, Martin appeared in the archway, coffee in hand. "Hey, kiddo," he said, smiling like nothing was broken. Allison's face softened a bit. "Hey, Dad." They hugged. Longer than hers with Melissa. And Melissa felt it in her spine like a slow shiver. "We should talk," Martin said, giving Melissa a look that was both warning and invitation. Allison glanced between them, then nodded. "Okay." They went into his study. Melissa didn't follow. She sat in the living room, pretending to scroll through her phone while straining to hear the murmurs beyond the door. No raised voices. No accusations. Just low, steady conversation. When Allison finally emerged nearly 45 minutes later, her face was unreadable. But something had shifted. She walked past Melissa toward the guest room without a word, just a tight-lipped nod. Melissa followed. "Allison?" Her daughter paused. "Yeah, I know things are confusing right now." Allison blinked slowly. "Are they?" Melissa's mouth opened, but no words came. Allison waited half a second, then disappeared into the room and shut the door. Gently, quietly, with surgical distance. Melissa didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine she didn't want, and stared out the window for 37 minutes. And that's when she saw it. The moment that cracked her in two. Allison, standing in the driveway with Olivia. They weren't just talking. They were laughing. Then came the hug, full-bodied, long, genuine. Allison rested her chin on Olivia's shoulder the way she used to do with Melissa in middle school, before recitals and exams and heartbreaks. Before all of this, Melissa's hand tightened on the stem of her wine glass until it trembled. She stepped back from the window, chest caving in, the sound of her own heartbeat louder than the silence of the room. A dozen thoughts raced through her head. She should confront them. Ask why. Say something. Fix it. But she didn't move. Because deep down, in a place even her lies couldn't reach, she knew the truth. Olivia had been the one wronged. Martin had been the one hurt. And Allison? Allison had always watched, had always listened. And now she had chosen. Not sides. People. The kind who didn't wear masks. The kind who told the truth even when it burned. Melissa had raised a daughter strong enough to walk away from her. And now? She was watching her do just that. The ballroom was gleaming, crystal chandeliers casting soft light over tailored suits, polished heels clicking like metronomes on marble floors, champagne flowing like guilt on autopilot. Melissa had organized this charity gala for months, booked the venue herself, approved every wine label, every canopy, every little monogrammed napkin that read Empower, Elevate, Heal. Irony, it turned out, had RSVP'd early. She arrived fashionably late, draped in deep emerald, diamonds at her throat, smiling like nothing could touch her. That smile was a mask now. Every curve of it waxed and polished, practiced until it didn't quiver even when her stomach did. A few heads turned. Of course they did. Her name still carried weight in this crowd, clients, board members, socialites with too much lip filler and too little loyalty. She was halfway through a glass of Pinot when the whisper started. Not loud, but sharp, like glass cracking. She followed the glances and turned toward the main entrance. and froze. Martin walked in wearing a navy suit she hadn't seen in years. The one she once told him made him look too ambitious. He wore it better now. His posture straighter. His eyes colder. On his arm? Olivia. Hair up. Black dress. Not flashy precise. A scalpel, not a spotlight. They weren't touching suggestively. There was no smirk. No flourish. Just presence. And that was enough. Melissa's breath snagged in her throat. Her fingers curled around the champagne flute like it might steady her. She forced a laugh loud enough to seem natural, just short of hysterical. Lena, her colleague, leaned over. Isn't that? Yes, Melissa said quickly, eyes forward. He's just trying to provoke me. Right, Lena said. Well, he's doing a great job. As the evening unfolded, Martin and Olivia didn't seek out conversation. They didn't have to. People came to them. Some curious. Some cautious. A few with that awkward half-smile you give a man you underestimated. Martin shook hands. Olivia nodded. And slowly, the current shifted. Melissa watched from a distance, seething under perfect posture, a practiced hostess tethered to a crumbling illusion. Every laugh Olivia earned, every nod Martin received, it cut her in micro-slices. And then came the toast. Melissa clinked her glass with a fork, stepping to the small platform just in front of the band. The room dimmed slightly. Conversations faded. All eyes drifted toward her. She smiled, still sharp, still standing. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began. We're here to support a cause close to my heart, families in crisis. Rebuilding. Surviving. Becoming stronger. The words hung for half a second too long. A few people shifted. Melissa scanned the room and continued. It's in times of darkness we find out who we really are. And with the support of people who believe in truth and healing it. Olivia's voice cut through like a scalpel. Let's all raise a glass, she said, stepping just beside Martin, her tone light, even pleasant. Melissa's words stalled. Her hand hovered midair. Olivia continued, to those who destroy homes and still call themselves victims. The silence was instant. No laughter. No polite chuckles. Just the sound of a chandelier swaying above the tension. A few eyes shot toward Melissa. One woman actually lowered her glass. A man coughed awkwardly, muttering something into his wife's ear. Melissa forced a smile. Well, that was. She didn't finish the sentence. Because she knew what was happening. This wasn't a scandal being whispered in corners anymore. This wasn't private pain cloaked in high society grins. This was the public unmasking. And the worst part? No one seemed shocked. Not anymore. They just sipped their drinks. Watched. Melissa stepped down from the platform. Her heels too loud now, the ear too tight. She'd built her kingdom on image, on story, on curated grace. But all it took was one sentence, measured, true, undeniable, to shatter the glass wall she thought would protect her. Now everyone could see. And no one was turning away. The elevator ride to the 19th floor felt endless. Melissa stared at her reflection in the brushed steel doors. Makeup perfect, hair pinned, jaw tight. She had spent years cultivating this version of herself. Melissa Green, Executive Vice President of Strategy, the woman who could spin layoffs into vision shifts and budget cuts into realignments. Nothing touched her. Until now. The whispers hadn't stopped since the gala. Not after Olivia's toast. Not after Allison stopped returning her texts. Not after Martin stopped pretending. But she still had this. Her office. Her title. Her conference calls with European partners where she used phrases like market disruption and pivot point while sipping espresso from a $90 mug. She could still control this space. Or so she thought. By 10:43 a.m., she was sitting at her desk, reading through a Q3 forecast when Janine, the intern, poked her head in, eyes wide. There's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent. Melissa barely looked up. Tell him to schedule something. I'm in meetings all. Her office door opened before Janine could respond. Martin stepped inside, in a navy blazer. Calm, holding a manila envelope like it contained nothing more than tax receipts. Behind him, a man in a gray suit and round glasses followed, clipboard in hand, seal around his neck, licensed notary. Melissa stood so fast her chair bumped the bookshelf behind her. What the hell are you doing? Martin didn't smile. I just wanted to make sure this wasn't ambiguous. He raised his voice just enough to carry into the hallway. So you can't say you weren't informed this time. He dropped the envelope on her desk like a gavel. The sound echoed. Martin, that's your copy. Notarized. Delivered in your professional capacity, since your personal credibility is, let's say, lacking. She snatched it up, flipping it open. Pages. Sealed. Dated. Filed. Divorce. Asset dissolution. Pre-disclosure of evidence. All airtight. You planned this whole thing. She spat, voice trembling now. You sick son of a... Martin turned to the notary and said, flatly, please confirm delivery. Delivered and witnessed. The man said, scribbling quickly. Melissa's hands curled around the edge of her desk. You planned this whole thing. She repeated, louder this time, voice cracking with rage. Martin looked her dead in the eye. I planned what you forced me to. Just outside her office, someone's phone was raised. Recording. Not discreetly. The intern had frozen in place. A junior analyst leaned from their cubicle. Someone whispered, is that her husband? Another voice, ex-husband. She could feel it unraveling, like pulling the thread on a hem and watching the entire dress collapse. Melissa turned to the notary. This isn't valid. I didn't consent to. You did, Martin said quietly. When you chose lies over dignity, deceit over love, and ego over family. I built this company, she hissed. No, he replied. You performed in it. He walked toward the door, then paused. I'll let you break the news to HR. You're not going to be CFO much longer. She laughed, shrill, forced. You can't touch this place. Martin looked back once. I don't have to. He nodded to the hallway, where two men in suits, corporate counsel, were now conferring with her assistant. The notary handed them a sealed copy and stepped out silently. Melissa stood there, the paper trembling in her hand, her chest burning. She wanted to scream, throw something, control something, but all she could do was stand. Because the thing she'd clung to the longest, her power, was vanishing. Not from scandal, but from precision. He hadn't just exposed her. He'd made it official. The house was too quiet. Melissa stepped inside, keys limp in her hand, the echo of her heels bouncing off hollow walls. No scent of fresh coffee. No faint hum of the dishwasher. No Martin humming blues in the kitchen. No Allison's duffel by the stairs. Just absence. She moved through the house like a ghost inspecting its own death scene. The framed wedding photos were gone. The wine rack cleared. Her favorite chair, the one Martin always called the throne, missing from its corner. The dining room table still stood, but only 3 chairs remained. She climbed the stairs with mechanical dread. In the master bedroom, the closet door stood open like a mouth mid-screen. His side, emptied. Her side, exposed. The illusion of togetherness gone, the fantasy of permanence ripped off the walls with the nails still visible. But it wasn't until she sat on the edge of the stripped mattress, phone in hand, that she realized what still haunted her. That night, that couch. The moment it all began to publicly unravel. She opened the security app, something Martin had always handled, but she remembered the credentials. The footage from that night was still there. She scrubbed to 4:12 a.m. Play. She watched herself stumble in, humming, heels in one hand, keys in the other. Smirking. She tapped the screen. Zoomed in. There they were. Martin on the couch, sitting calmly, like he was hosting a dinner party with truth as the main course. Olivia, seated beside him, composed. Controlled. But something flickered behind them. A shape in the hallway. A figure half-shadowed, half-lit. Melissa froze the frame. Pinched to zoom. Closer. Closer. It wasn't a trick of the light. Allison. Standing still. Just far enough from the room to go unnoticed, unless you knew where to look. Her arms were folded. Her face unreadable, but her presence undeniable. She'd been there. She knew. Not only had Martin orchestrated the moment, not only had Olivia returned from the ashes of betrayal, Allison had helped them. She'd stood in the hallway as her mother walked in grinning from a one-night stand. She'd watched. She'd chosen silence. Chosen truth. Chosen them. Melissa's hand began to tremble. The phone slipped from her grip and landed face down on the hardwood with a soft thunk. She didn't move to pick it up. Didn't blink. Just sat. And shook. The lies, the performances, the layers she'd woven so tightly around her life, they didn't just collapse. They never mattered. Because in the end, the people she thought were props in her story had rewritten the final scene. Without her. And now? She wasn't just alone. She was irrelevant. I think it's time we both see other people. That's what she said. With a butter knife in one hand and an open jar of blackberry jam in the other. Doug didn't drop his mug. He didn't freeze. He just blinked once, as if trying to determine whether he'd actually heard the words or just imagined them. The jam, dark and glossy, smeared across her toast like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just detonated 27 years of shared life over breakfast. He set his mug down slowly. Ceramic touched the wood table with a soft tap. "If you insist," he said, voice level, almost too quiet for the room. Megan looked up, her expression a cocktail of mild surprise and practiced calm. She tilted her head. "That's it. You're not even going to?" Doug raised a brow, then reached for the sports section. "You're an adult. You make your choices." She blinked now. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Doubt, maybe, or annoyance that the script wasn't playing out the way she'd rehearsed in the mirror. But Doug was done offering performances. "Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness." The rest of the breakfast was silent, except for the occasional crunch of toast and the shuffling of newspaper pages. Megan tapped her phone screen, checked her messages, and Doug noted it, smiled. A little too fast. A little too wide. By 9 a.m., she was out the door. Said she was meeting the girls for yoga. Funny. She hadn't mentioned yoga in months. Doug sat there for another 10 minutes after the door clicked shut. Not moving. Not thinking. Just processing. Then he stood, walked to the hallway, and opened the cedar drawer where he kept the backup keys. Not to the house. To the lake house. That evening, the call wasn't long. Just a few sentences. A pause. A breath. "Elise? It's Doug." A rustle on the other end. She sounded cautious. "Doug? Hey. Everything okay?" He stared out the kitchen window, where the hydrangeas she planted 2 summers ago drooped under late spring rain. She said it's time we see other people. A longer pause. Then, I'm not calling to complain, he added quickly, already anticipating pity. I need a change of scenery. And I figured you might understand." Her voice softened. "You going to the lake?" "Yeah. I'll bring wine." He hung up, exhaled once, and finally allowed himself to feel something. But not anger. Not sorrow. Just a strange, electric stillness. Like the moment before a system reboots. Later that night, Megan returned. Her hair damp, the faint smell of someone else's cologne clinging to her clothes. She didn't notice that his suitcase was gone. She didn't notice that half the photo albums were missing from the den shelf. She definitely didn't notice the empty hook where the lake house keys used to hang. She poured herself a glass of wine and turned on the TV, chuckling at a show he used to watch with her. Once. Doug was already miles away by then, watching the same rain fall over Lake Pend-Oreille, with a bottle of Glenlivet and one glass. Just one. The old him would have fought, would have demanded answers, begged for clarity, asked, why? But the old Doug was obsolete. She'd made that clear. And as a retired systems analyst, Doug knew, when the software breaks, you don't scream at it. You replace it. Quietly. Efficiently. Without warning. And sometimes, just sometimes, you restore an older version of something far more valuable. Something stable. Something loyal. He looked at the fireplace. Then down at the screen of his phone. A message from Elise. 4 words. Leaving now. Bring matches. Doug smiled, for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Doug opened the closet, pulled down a single duffel, and laid it on the bed. No frantic packing. No tears. Just methodical movement, like a man preparing for a fishing trip, not a marital ejection. He selected his clothes not by sentiment, but by utility. A few button-downs, a pair of hiking boots, his old flannel robe. He didn't touch her side of the closet. Didn't even glance at it. Then came the photo albums. 4 of them, each leather-bound and dusted from years of disuse. They weren't on display. Megan said they cluttered the shelves. But Doug had always liked them. His fingers hovered over the spines. One had a Polaroid of them in '99, smiling outside their first house, faces younger but just as uncertain. He slid it into the box. Not because he wanted to remember, but because she'd already started forgetting. He left a note on the counter. No grand farewell. Just taking some time. Don't wait up. D. Then he backed his truck out of the driveway and pointed it north toward Lake Pendorile. The house by the lake had been their retirement dream until Megan decided dreams were dull. So Doug finished the renovation himself, refinished the deck, rewired the plumbing, even put in a new wood stove, which she'd called too rustic for her Pinterest boards. Now it was home. The moment he unlocked the door, something shifted. Not peace, exactly. Not yet. But clarity. He walked inside, opened the windows wide, and let the wind erase whatever scent she'd left behind on his shirts. By noon, Elise arrived. She didn't knock. She just stepped inside with a bag of groceries and a look that said, "I knew she'd do this eventually. You want coffee or something stronger?" Doug asked, gesturing to the liquor shelf. She raised an eyebrow. "It's 11 a.m. Exactly. They drank coffee on the deck, watching a pair of loons drift by on the water. Neither of them talked about Megan. Not directly. Just enough silence to say we don't need to. Back in the city, Megan was already rewriting the narrative. At brunch with her yoga friends, she sighed dramatically between bites of arugula salad. "Doug's going through something," she said. "A sort of late-life crisis. Isolation, maybe. You know how men get after retirement." They all nodded. Sympathetic. Predictable. But later that week, her friend Joni sipped a mimosa and casually mentioned, "Oh, I passed by your lake house the other day. I think I saw Elise's Subaru in the driveway." Megan froze for half a second, barely enough to notice. But the twitch in her left eye betrayed her. "Elise," she repeated, too evenly. "No, she said she was visiting her sister in Portland." Joni shrugged. "Maybe she stopped by. Cute little spot, though. You guys ever stay there?" Megan smiled tightly. "Not for years." Back home, Megan stood in front of the hallway mirror for an uncomfortably long time. She didn't like the way she looked lately. Not tired. Just faded. The kind of look a man forgets after enough quiet breakfasts and invisible evenings. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She considered calling Elise, but didn't. Instead, she scrolled through her messages until she reached the one from Jeff. Work retreat. She stared at the last photo he'd sent. Him in a hotel gym. Shirtless. Flexing. It suddenly looked cheap. At the lake, Doug stood barefoot on the dock, skipping stones across the evening water. Elise was inside making something that smelled like rosemary and garlic. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. He just looked steady, unshakable. The kind of man a woman forgets at her own peril. The snap of the screen door echoed like an old memory, familiar, sharp, and strangely comforting. Elise stepped into the lake house kitchen with 2 canvas bags looped over her arm and a bottle of Pinot Noir cradled against her ribs. She wore her usual denim jacket, hair in a loose twist, no makeup. Not because she didn't care, but because she never needed it. Doug looked up from the stove. He was boiling water for pasta, or maybe just pretending to. "You always bring wine," he said. "You always act surprised." She smirked, setting the bottle on the counter. "Still drink it with ice?" He paused. "Only when I want to be judged." She laughed, that low, raspy kind of laugh that had always caught him off guard. The kind that sounded like it belonged in smoky blues bars or in quiet kitchens, not at brunch tables with Megan and her curated circle of judgment. They moved easily around each other, like they'd been doing this for years. Cooking, chopping, uncorking bottles. They didn't talk about Megan. Not yet. Instead, Elise asked about the lake house upgrades. The new insulation. The refinished floorboards. She noticed the old photo of Doug and Megan by the fireplace. She didn't comment on it, but he saw her glance linger. By the time the fire was roaring, they'd moved to the couch, 2 glasses deep, watching the flames like they held answers to questions neither of them was willing to ask. Doug broke the silence first. "Do you remember that night?" Elise didn't look over. She didn't need to. "Which one?" He hesitated. "The hospital. After the miscarriage." She inhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Of course I do. It had been 20 years ago. Megan had lost the baby at 16 weeks. Doug had been wrecked, quietly, inwardly, the way men are trained to suffer. Megan had cried for days, but eventually moved on like it was a season that passed. Elise, on the other hand, had shown up with soup and stayed until 2 a.m. They sat in the kitchen, him and Elise, speaking barely a word. At some point, she'd reached out, just touched his hand. Their faces had been inches apart. He remembered the way her eyes looked in that moment. Sad, yes, but also fiercely loyal. Protective. I should have kissed you, Doug said quietly. Elise didn't flinch. She took a slow sip from her glass and set it down. You weren't mine to kiss. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't empty this time. It buzzed, like the second before thunder. Outside, rain tapped lightly on the roof. Eventually, Doug leaned back and let his head rest against the cushions. Elise stood, grabbed a blanket from the chair, and draped it over him without a word. Sleep, she whispered. You look like you haven't in years. She left the fire burning low, turned off the kitchen light, and disappeared into the guest room. Doug didn't wake once. Back in the city, Megan sat in her car outside a wine bar with Jeff from work. She checked her phone. Still nothing from Doug. Her lips curled into a smirk as Jeff said something arrogant and empty. She laughed, louder than necessary. But her eyes drifted to the rearview mirror and stayed there, not because she cared about traffic, but because she didn't like the way her own reflection looked under dim parking lot light. Like someone watching something slip away. Something she thought she'd caged long ago. Megan never liked silence. Not the real kind, anyway. The kind that didn't pause, it just vanished. Doug's silence wasn't wounded. It was worse. It was comfortable. 3 days had passed since he left. She didn't call, didn't text. Told herself it was strategy, not pride. Let him sulk, she told her friend Casey over soy cappuccinos. He'll come around. But Doug didn't sulk. Doug disappeared. By day 4, Megan's thumb hovered over his contact. She didn't press it. Instead, she reached for her oldest trick, social probing. So, Elise, she said that Friday during their post-tennis brunch. She said it casually, as if Elise was a loose end in a story she barely remembered. Casey blinked. Haven't seen her in a while, actually. She skipped brunch 2 Sundays in a row. Said she was out of town. Portland, right? Megan asked quickly. I think that was last month. Said something about needing fresh air. Lake something. Megan's fork stopped midair. Her smile did not. Later that afternoon, she drove. Not out of jealousy, Megan told herself, but out of curiosity. It was her right, wasn't it? She helped pick the tile in that lake house. It was practically hers. The gravel crunched under her Lexus tires as she coasted past the narrow bend that opened onto Doug's property. She slowed, headlights off. The lake house looked occupied. Cozy even. Warm yellow light flickered in the windows. The porch lamp was on. Shadows danced behind the drawn curtain. 2 figures, not facing each other, but near. Too near. Doug's silhouette leaned in briefly. The second figure's hand lifted. Wine glass, maybe. Megan's stomach twisted. It wasn't a violent jolt. It was precise. Like something calibrated, inevitable. She parked a few hundred feet away and got out. Cold air bit her ankles. She walked quietly across the grass until she could just barely see inside. 2 plates on the table. Steam rising from a cast iron skillet. A fire roaring in the hearth. And then Elise stepped into view. Hair down. Wearing one of those oversized cardigans she always claimed was just for home. Megan didn't move. She just stood there, watching the glass fog slightly from inside. She called Elise's phone. No answer. Again. Voicemail. By the time she got home, her hands were shaking, but not from cold. She poured herself a generous glass of wine, opened Instagram to distract herself, and stopped mid-scroll. Doug had posted. He never posted. A single photo. Grilled salmon on cedar planks. A bottle of red. Lake in the background. But it wasn't the food. It was the wine glass on the table. One full, one half full. The hand resting near the stem of the second glass wore a silver bracelet. Elise's bracelet. The one Megan had given her for her birthday 5 years ago. Suddenly the silence wasn't mysterious. It was humiliating. Doug hadn't vanished. He had recalibrated. She hadn't lost a husband. She had forfeited a witness. One who now had better company. Megan shut her phone off, dropped it on the marble countertop, and stared out the window. But the city lights looked dimmer tonight. And the silence? The silence now grinned. The morning sun was cruel. Megan sat in the kitchen, robe clinging too tightly, espresso cooling untouched. Her phone lay face down on the table like it had betrayed her. In a way, it had. Doug hadn't responded. Not to the first message. Not to the second. Not even to the one she almost deleted twice before hitting send. Can we talk? Maybe I was rash. She timed it carefully, 8:06 a.m., right when she knew he'd be sipping his second cup of black coffee, scrolling headlines with military precision like always. But Doug didn't bite. 8 hours later, when she'd nearly convinced herself he hadn't seen it, her phone buzzed. Just once. No typing bubbles. No ellipses of hope. One message. For words. No need. You were clear. Megan stared at the screen so long it locked itself. She unlocked it again just to confirm he hadn't said more. He hadn't. No curiosity. No anger. No, what do you mean? Rash? Just that maddening, surgical sentence. You were clear. And he was right. She had been. She delivered her little bomb at breakfast with a dollop of jam and a smug tone of modern empowerment. She expected confusion, protest, drama. But Doug recalculated. And now he was gone. No begging. No pleading. No breakdowns. Just gone. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair sideways, and stalked into the den. Poured herself a splash of bourbon even though it was barely noon. Her hand shook as she typed the next message. Are you seeing someone? No punctuation. No explanation. She hit send and stared. Watched the delivered stamp appear. And then nothing. No read receipt. No reply. Just the cold glow of her screen like a digital shrug. Minutes passed. Then 20. Then an hour. She refreshed his Instagram. No new posts. She checked Elise's. Still private. Always private. Megan clicked. Unfollow. Then follow again just to reset the notification. Maybe Elise would see it and feel something. Another hour passed. Still no reply. She walked to the mirror in the hallway. Her reflection stared back. Elegant, composed, controlled. But even she didn't buy it anymore. The moment cracked when she muttered, he's bluffing. Then, without warning, she hurled her phone across the room. It struck the wall near the bookshelf, splintering the corner of a framed photo, her and Doug at a fundraiser 6 years ago. She stared at the cracked glass, at her own smile frozen next to his. It used to be hers, that smirk, that quiet steadiness in his eyes. Now it belonged to someone else. Someone who cooked salmon with him on cedar planks and laughed in soft, private spaces. Megan paced the living room, chewing at a thumbnail. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful, it was mocking. Every quiet corner whispered. You thought he'd chase you. You thought he'd break. You thought wrong. She glanced at the wall clock. 5:17 p.m. Doug still hadn't replied. Her mind raced. Maybe Elise was just being a friend. Maybe Doug was testing her. Maybe he was just pretending. But beneath those fragile excuses, the truth pressed hard. Megan had fired a shot expecting smoke, and got a precision strike instead. Doug wasn't pretending. Doug was done. She rehearsed the moment 3 times in the car mirror. Hair down, loose curls. Check. Light makeup, just enough to say I'm still the woman you married, not I'm trying too hard. Check. The navy blue dress, cut just above the knee, that Doug once said made her look dangerous in a good way. Check. Megan stood at the foot of the lake house steps, smoothing the fabric with sweaty palms. The gravel crunched beneath her heels as she walked up, each step stiff with denial. The sun was just dipping behind the trees, casting long gold shadows across the porch. Perfect time for a heartfelt talk, she told herself. A little nostalgia. A soft apology. A door left cracked just enough for the past to walk back in. She knocked. A pause. Then footsteps. But when the door opened, it wasn't Doug. It was Elise. Hair wet, wrapped in a towel that clung like an afterthought. Steam curled from the hallway behind her. Her face, flushed and makeup-free, held no surprise. No fake smile. Just calm. Megan blinked, trying not to react. Hey. I was just in the area, she said, voice rehearsed, tone casual. Elise tilted her head, like she'd just spotted a squirrel that didn't belong on the porch. Were you? She said softly. Not warm. Not hostile. Just indifferent. Before Megan could answer, Doug appeared behind her. He wasn't in flannel. Not this time. He wore a slate gray sweater and jeans, barefoot, looking like a man entirely at home. His hand landed on Elise's shoulder. Lightly. Naturally. As if it had been there 100 times before. Megan felt it before she saw it. Her knees buckled slightly, like someone had unhooked the cables holding her up. Doug didn't flinch. He didn't stiffen or smile or blink twice. He just looked at her like she was the mailman. Expected. Unremarkable. Hi, he said. Not a welcome. Not a question. Just a syllable of polite acknowledgement. Megan forced a smile so wide it almost cracked. You look. Well, Elise stepped aside, just slightly. Not an invitation, more like making room for air. Doug didn't move. Do you have a minute? Megan asked, suddenly aware that she was still holding her clutch like a weapon. Doug exchanged a glance with Elise, one she wasn't privy to. Then, gently, he said, we're actually in the middle of something. The words weren't cruel. They were worse. True. Megan's throat tightened. She tried to pivot. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Doug's hand never left Elise's shoulder. I am. Her voice cracked just slightly. This isn't how it was supposed to go. He nodded slowly. You're right. Then Elise turned to him and said, I'll finish setting the table, and disappeared into the house, leaving Megan outside, still smiling, still clutching her little black clutch like it held her dignity. Doug stepped forward half a pace. You said you wanted to explore other options. This is one. Her eyes scanned his face for something pity, anger, a flicker of doubt. But there was nothing left to grab, nothing to twist. He was already gone. She was just late in noticing. I didn't think you'd, she began, but he raised a hand, not to silence her, just to stop the performance. I know, he said. You thought I'd wait. And with that, he turned, walked back inside, and closed the door behind him. Not slammed. Closed. The kind of closing you don't come back from. The next evening, Megan returned. She didn't knock this time. She stood at the threshold of the lake house like a woman trying to reclaim something she never fully owned. She'd spent all day rationalizing. They're just playing house. It's nothing real. He's hurt. He's reacting. But hurt men don't serve wine in decanters and light cedarwood candles before dinner. Doug opened the door himself, without surprise or annoyance. Elise is making halibut, he said. You can stay, if you're hungry. The tone was formal, civil, the kind people use with ex-colleagues, or neighbors, or ghosts. Megan hesitated, half expecting Elise to protest. But she didn't. She simply emerged from the kitchen carrying a ceramic dish, set it gently on the table, and laid out 3 plates. Megan noticed the napkins were cloth, folded into triangles. Elise always folded hers that way. They sat. Doug at the head. Elise to his left. Megan, uncertain, took the seat across. It felt too far to reconnect, too close to hide. Conversation hovered at 10,000 feet. Doug asked about her car's tire issues. He'd noticed the wear last winter. Elise complimented the dress Megan wore. Megan offered thanks like it tasted wrong in her mouth. No one mentioned a thing between them. That jagged, smoking crater in the middle of the table. It was Megan who finally broke the script. She set her fork down, still untouched, and leaned forward. Doug. I've been thinking about what we had. Doug didn't stop cutting his fish. You've had time to. I didn't mean. He looked up, calm, unbothered. You wanted other options. This is one of them. A silence fell so thick it felt engineered. Like the room itself had paused to hear what would come next. Elise said nothing, but she looked straight at Megan. Not cruelly, not smugly, just directly. Megan felt the weight of it. The accusation not spoken. The question not asked. Why did you throw it away? She reached for her glass, realized it was still full, and placed it back down. Her fork scraped the plate once as she adjusted it, and then rested beside the untouched food like a flag of surrender. Doug reached for Elise's hand, casually, beneath the table. It wasn't meant for show. It was just normal. Routine. Something real. Megan's stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from the sudden understanding that she had walked into a scene, not a conversation. She wasn't a participant. She was an audience. A forgotten character watching the sequel unfold. When Elise rose to clear the plates, Doug stood with her. Thanks for coming by, he said. Not, let's talk again. Not, this isn't over. Just, thanks. Megan nodded mechanically. Rose. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees whispered things she didn't want to hear. As she walked to her car, Megan glanced back through the window. They were laughing at something. Not loudly. Just enough. And in that moment, it hit her, not like a crash, but like a slow, cruel leak. She hadn't just lost him. She'd made sure someone else found him. She waited until midnight to write it. The house was dark except for the amber glow of her desk lamp. Megan sat hunched over the oak writing desk Doug had given her for their 10th anniversary, a gift he'd customized with secret drawers and dovetail joints, back when he still believed in permanence. She wrote longhand, the way she used to when apologizing meant something. Her pen scratched across the page with urgency, the loops in her handwriting growing messier the more truth she tried to hide in elegance. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. It was a plea disguised as reflection. Pages of half remorse, selective memory, and strategic guilt. She mentioned the miscarriage. She mentioned how people change, how marriage is never simple. She wrote that she had made a mistake, but only because she thought they had both given up. That she never stopped loving him. That maybe there was still time to fix what was broken. That he didn't need to make things final. She signed it with her full name. Folded it twice. No envelope. No perfume. She drove out to the lake house under a moonless sky, headlights carving a pale path through the pine-lined road. Gravel crunched like bones under her tires as she coasted up to the mailbox, the same one she'd painted a soft green the year they bought the place. She slipped the letter in and paused. Some childish part of her expected the air to shift, for the trees to whisper some hint of mercy. They didn't. She drove home without looking back. The next evening, Doug and Elise sat by the fireplace, the kind of quiet between them that only exists when no one needs to be entertaining. He sipped bourbon. She read a dog-eared novel. Outside, snow flirted with the edges of the deck. Elise stood and walked to the front door. Mail's here. She returned with a few catalogs, a gas bill, and the letter. She held it up like a curiosity. From Megan. Doug didn't react. He took it, unfolded it, and read every line in silence. No frown. No smile. No anger. Just stillness. When he finished, he looked into the fire. The flames licked at the logs, hungry and wild, casting gold across the stone hearth. Doug stood, walked to the edge of the fireplace. Without a word, he fed the letter to the flames. The paper curled instantly, blackening along the edges like a photograph dissolving in acid. Elise watched but said nothing. He stared into the fire for a long moment, then murmured, more to himself than her, no more false chances. Then he sat down again and reached for her hand, not in response, not in reaction, just continuation. Outside, the wind stirred, but the house held steady. Megan didn't receive a reply. She wouldn't. She wasn't supposed to be there. That's what Megan told herself the second her tires screeched into the driveway. Elise's silver Subaru was parked too neatly in front of the garage, the same spot Megan had claimed for decades with a flick of her wrist and a sigh through her teeth. That stupid old car, always smelling like peppermint gum and pine cleaner, now looked like a territorial flag planted squarely in Megan's past. She slammed the door shut harder than she needed to, marched across the lawn like it was still hers to march. The curtains were open, the porch lights on. Through the front window, she saw Doug in the living room. He was sorting through a crate, records. His records. The jazz vinyls she always said were good background noise for cleaning. His back was to her, slow, methodical. Elise walked in from the hallway, arms full of tools. His tools. The ones Megan had moved to the garage cabinets years ago because they cluttered the vibe. She set them on the couch, like she knew exactly what belonged to him. Megan didn't knock. She barged in. The door wasn't locked. Doug didn't even flinch when she stepped inside. Why is she here? Megan's voice cracked between fury and panic, the pitch unfamiliar to even her own ears. Elise glanced up. She didn't look startled, just mildly inconvenienced. Doug stood slowly. His eyes were calm, resigned. The kind of expression you wear at a funeral you saw coming for years. She's part of my life now, he said. Just finishing the last page. The last page. Megan echoed, breath catching. This is our house. Doug looked around. No, it was. I've already signed the transfer. My name's coming off everything next week. You don't get to do that, she said louder now. Not with her. Not with her. Elise didn't speak. She just turned and picked up another crate. Doug watched her with something Megan hadn't seen in years, quiet regard. She was my friend, Megan hissed. Mine. Doug didn't shout, didn't even raise his voice. Just said flatly. She was. Megan's mouth opened, then closed. He stepped forward, not threatening, just clear. You threw us both away. I just didn't realize it at the time. The words landed like a dropped cinder block. Megan stood there, breath shallow, heartbeat pounding like a warning siren in her ears. The room around her, her curtains, her art, her chosen light fixtures, suddenly looked foreign, decorated for a woman who no longer existed. Elise crossed behind her, carrying another box. She paused just long enough to glance at Megan. Not with pity, with finality. Megan didn't move. Couldn't. She had wanted options, choices, open doors and wide margins. But now she understood, every choice is a wager. And she'd bet against the one man who never played games. Doug didn't look back as he picked up the crate of jazz records and walked out the door behind Elise. No flourish, no parting words, just silence. And for the first time, Megan realized. The silence wasn't coming from him. It was echoing inside her. The sun dropped low over the lake, brushing the water in copper and quiet gold. Doug sat back in the old porch chair he'd refinished last spring, its cedar arms warm under his forearms, the rhythm of the world finally sinking to his own pulse again. Next to him, Elise cradled a mug of tea, Earl Grey, strong, the way she liked it, and stared into the horizon with that steady, unreadable gaze of hers. They didn't talk much that evening. They didn't need to. Every word that mattered had already been said in the spaces between them over the last few weeks, in late-night cooking, in shared playlists, in porch repairs, and fireside glances. There was no performance, no overt declarations of anything. Just two people quietly sinking after decades of being orbiting satellites, close enough to see, never allowed to touch. Doug reached over and laid his hand on hers. No squeeze. No dramatic pause. Just rest. Elise glanced down. Her thumb brushed over his once, then returned to her cup. Behind them, in the distance, Megan's house, now hers alone, sat wrapped in silence. Not the comforting kind. The kind that feels like a mouth sealed shut after a scream that went unheard. The moving van idled at the curb. Two workers moved like shadows across the driveway, wheeling out Doug's final boxes, old woodworking tools, a few paintings he'd actually liked, and the humidor Megan always complained made the den smell like an old man's regrets. Inside, Megan stood in the upstairs window. Her eyes followed every motion as if she might reverse them by sheer force of will. She didn't wave, didn't cry, didn't even open the glass. She just watched. Doug didn't look back. Not once. No long glance at the life he'd built and left behind. No farewell to the woman who thought his patience was infinite. She had gambled on permanence. But permanence doesn't exist when it's taken for granted. Out on the porch, Elise finished her tea and set the cup down with a soft clink. Doug exhaled slowly and watched the light shift as the sun slid beneath the waterline, smooth as a curtain being drawn. A bird called in the distance. Some kind of loon. Elise leaned back, eyes half closed. I like it here. Doug smiled without looking at her. Me too. The last box slid into the truck. The door shut. The van pulled away. And somewhere behind a double-pane window, a woman who once believed she had the upper hand stood frozen in the ruins of her own arrogance. There was no slamming door. No final scream. Just the gentle roll of tires on gravel. And a man who simply left, with her best friend, her blind spot, her constant, and never once looked over his shoulder. She said it between bites of asparagus. No tension in her voice. No apology, no lead-in, not even eye contact. I slept with my boss. Big deal. She didn't look up from her plate. Just popped another forkful in, like she was reciting weather. The way she said it, indifferent, mechanical, practiced, made my skin crawl more than if she'd screamed it into my face. The clock behind her ticked. 7:12 p.m. I stared at the flame of the candle flickering between us and blinked once. Just once. Cassandra sipped her wine. Some overpriced bottle she'd picked out last week after a client dinner. She swirled it, sniffed it, and smiled faintly, like she had just unburdened herself and now felt lighter. Liberated. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. Instead, I calmly placed my fork down, folded the linen napkin with my usual symmetry, and stood up from the table. She kept chewing. Her eyes flicked up, finally, with just a glint of something, not regret, not fear. No, this was confusion. Like she couldn't quite figure out why I wasn't giving her the performance she was expecting. Doug, she said, drawing out the O like I was a child about to be corrected. I walked past her. Doug, come on, she said, laughing now. You're not seriously mad, are you? It's not like we've been close lately. You're always so distant. So methodical. Still, I said nothing. My steps echoed against the hardwood. It was always her complaint that I didn't react, that I was too cold, that I processed things like data in a spreadsheet instead of emotions in a marriage. But what she never understood was that silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. I entered the hallway, past the framed photo from Aruba, the one she made me pose for in that ridiculous straw hat, and moved toward the study. She stayed at the table, assuming, I'm sure, that I'd go stew in my man cave, maybe return in an hour to try and talk things out, while she played the victim and blamed stress, her boss, hormones, and eventually, me. But I didn't go to stew. I went to complete. You don't work in logistics for 31 years without learning how to build a system, anticipate failure, and have contingencies locked and loaded. Cassandra always thought of me as boring, reliable, predictable. She thought that meant harmless. She forgot that I spend my life designing fail-safes. And she just triggered one. I heard her chair creak. She wasn't laughing anymore, probably realizing the silence had stretched a bit too long, that the absence of emotion wasn't apathy, it was tension, controlled, boiling beneath glass. And glass breaks. Doug. She called out again, sharper this time. I paused at the doorway to my study. Her voice echoed behind me, but I didn't turn around. Just 3 words. Calm. Final. Finish your wine. And then I closed the door behind me. The click of the door behind me might as well have been a steel vault slamming shut on 20 years of pretense. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. Every step had already been mapped out, logged, timestamped, just like the logistics systems I spent my career perfecting. Cassandra thought she was unpredictable, but predictable people make the best mistakes. They repeat patterns, use the same hotel, keep the same excuses, even cheat the same way their boss does, sloppily, arrogantly, like no one would ever bother to trace the mess they leave behind. I sat down at my desk and powered on the tower. My personal rig. Encrypted, air-gapped, double authenticated. She thought I just used it to play chess and budget spreadsheets. Cute. The interface loaded. Desktop clean. Only one icon sat waiting in the corner, a folder titled Endgame. Click. Inside. A full backup of her phone from 6 weeks ago, extracted via Wi-Fi sync when she left it charging on the kitchen island. Transcribed WhatsApp voice messages between her and Martin that would be the boss, including one particularly colorful rant about how she needed someone who wasn't built like a filing cabinet. Calendar events cross-referenced with GPS pings from the Tesla app one had mirrored onto my account 6 months ago. Voice recordings from the in-car assistant, triggered by a routine phrase she used to call him, call Martin, private cell. The AI logs those commands, stores them in the cloud. She didn't know that. The cherry? Her business dinner, receipt from 3 Thursdays ago, billed to her company card. Same night I had brought home takeout and she'd claimed she was too tired to talk. I even had a screen grab of the restaurant's check-in history, showing her table for 2 under Cassiar. Everything cataloged. Dated. Sorted. No accusations. No assumptions. Just evidence. Cold, neat rows of it. I dragged the folder to the USB drive, labeled it turnkey, and watched the progress bar fill like a slow-burning fuse. There was something cathartic about it, the clean click of digital vengeance. No chaos. No shouting. Just verification. Once the transfer finished, I popped the drive out and laid it on the blotter. Then I reached for the envelope. It wasn't some crumpled thing. It was heavyweight, off-white, the kind used for wedding invitations or retirement announcements. Appropriate, I thought. After all, I was announcing the death of her illusion and the retirement of my silence. I slipped the USB inside. Then, and this part was deliberate, I grabbed a red fine-tip pen and wrote 2 words on the front, dead center in small, meticulous print. Your turn. She thought she'd gotten the first move, that she'd tilted the board in her favor. No, she was just the warm-up, the pawn sacrifice. Now came the game she didn't even know she was in. I sealed the envelope and placed it face down in the center of my desk. She was still in the kitchen, probably rinsing her plate or checking Instagram or texting Martin something smug. She had no idea the reckoning was already archived. She wouldn't see it tonight. Not yet. First, I had to schedule the drop. Precisely. Discreetly. And when it landed, it wouldn't just be a message. It would be a verdict. The house was quiet by 10. Cassandra was on the couch, legs curled under her, sipping her second glass of Pinot and cackling at some late-night streaming comedy special. The laugh she used when she wanted to sound carefree, younger. The kind of laugh that said, "Look at me, I'm still fun." It echoed down the hall like nails dragged gently across drywall. I didn't watch. I didn't comment. She glanced back once and caught me in the doorway. I gave her a slight smile, practiced, warm, meaningless. She smiled back, oblivious. She probably thought I'd cooled off, gone upstairs to lick my ego. Maybe she assumed a stiff drink and a long shower would break me down by morning. Let her believe it. I walked up the stairs, closed the bedroom door behind me, sat down at my desk. My personal laptop, separate from my work machine, sat waiting in sleep mode. I tapped the space bar. The glow from the screen cut a clean halo through the dark room. No distractions, just numbers, terms, and time. I opened the folder labeled prenup_1997_final. Most people forget those documents exist after they sign them. Cassandra had. She assumed time diluted it, like wedding vows or gym memberships. But mine was bulletproof. I knew it because I'd updated it every 4 years like clockwork, just in case. Always legally valid. Always notarized. And, most importantly, it had a clause. Fidelity. Breach of that clause voided any right she had to the condo, the retirement shares, the healthcare plan, and most importantly, my name. She would walk away with exactly what she brought in. I cross-checked the clause's wording. Still ironclad. Then I opened a blank email and began typing. Subject, execution of Clause 14, prenuptial agreement. Body. Per our previous documentation and the attached evidence package, I am invoking Clause 14, subsection B, effective immediately. I authorize you to begin proceedings for asset protection, emergency financial isolation, and pre-divorce filings under Section 4.3. I attached the folder from the USB backup, the same one titled Turnkey. Evidence. Dates. Times. Transcripts. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was logistics. By midnight, the email was sent. At 12:13 a.m., I received confirmation. My attorney, Stewart, didn't need details. He knew my style. He simply wrote, "Understood. I'll handle it discreetly. Expect first drafts tomorrow afternoon." By 1 a.m., I was on the banking portal. Our joint checking account. Split. Her debit card? Flagged. Access to the emergency fund? Revoked. Not denied, just frozen. Quietly. Surgically. I left her personal savings alone. I wasn't cruel. Just clean. At 2:45 a.m., I drafted the apartment notification. I was the sole leaseholder. Cassandra had never signed anything. She assumed marriage was the paper that mattered. It wasn't. The condo board would receive the request for authorized occupant removal within 24 hours. With the prenup active, she'd have no leg to stand on. By 3:30 a.m., I'd packed a week's worth of clothes into a duffel bag. 1 suit, 2 dress shirts. Casuals. Nothing sentimental. Just inventory. At 4:10 a.m., I printed a list, bullet-pointed, of the exact items she could keep. No arguments later. No messy fights about who gets what. It wasn't emotional. It was a transaction. A controlled demolition of a structure no longer viable. I sat there in the low blue glow of the monitor, breathing in the silence. At 5:22 a.m., I walked back downstairs. She was still asleep on the couch, wine glass on the coffee table, her head tilted slightly like she was mid-smirk even in her dreams. Maybe dreaming of Martin. Maybe of nothing at all. I placed the envelope, the one that said, "Your turn," neatly on the dining table. Right next to the coffee mug she always ignored. The one that read, #BossLady. Fitting. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't even glance back. I stepped out, locking the door behind me with a click that sounded far too satisfying. Let her wake up to silence. Let her start guessing. She woke up sometime around 7:15 a.m. I know this because the Tesla pinged her profile activation. The car logs that when the driver's seat adjusts to her preferences. And she always checks her email at red lights. But what she saw first was the envelope. It was sitting where her smoothie glass usually went, right on top of a pale yellow placemat. Clean. Centered. Like a surgical instrument laid out before an operation. She probably thought it was a letter, maybe even an apology. She opened it, expecting a grovel. Instead, a single matte black USB drive slid into her hand. Heavy, cold, no label, just weight. She plugged it into her laptop. The contents unfolded like a quiet funeral. First folder, messages. Every text between her and Martin from the last 3 months. Organized by date. With timestamps. Metadata intact. The ones that said, "Bring wine this time. You owe me for last night face-blowing a kiss." Doug's got no clue. He still thinks I'm swamped with Q3 reports LOL. I swear if I have to pretend to like his roasted chicken one more time I'll scream. Every emoji. Every photo. Even the voice notes. Transcribed and backed up. Second folder. Meetings. A spreadsheet. 2 columns. Column A. Cassandra's work calendar. Recurring strategy sessions after hours. Column B. Hotel bookings under her Marriott business account. Each entry color-coded. Her off-site brainstorms, lined up with 2-bedroom suite reservations, billed straight to the company. Third folder. Audio. A single file. A 5-second clip from her Tesla's cloud history, synced through the onboard voice assistant. Cassandra speaking. "He's married, yeah? But Doug doesn't need to know. He'd never do anything." She set it on speaker, hands probably on the wheel, on her way to brunch or bed, or both. The AI clipped it for quality control. I clipped it for closure. Fourth file. Prenup clause 14.pdf. The original agreement. Scanned and signed. My signature. Hers. 2 witnesses. 1 notary. 3 lines highlighted in red. Infidelity on the part of either spouse voids all claim to shared assets, retirement accounts, spousal support, and residential entitlement. Fidelity to be defined as sexual or romantic contact outside of marriage without prior written consent. Violation shall be determined via documented evidence by either party, including but not limited to text communications, photographs, voice recordings, or third-party testimony. The folder closed itself with a soft mechanical click. Not a threat. Not a warning. A verdict. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't throw her out of the house. Instead, I handed her the final results like a well-compiled quarterly report. Just facts. Just data. I wanted her to sit there, alone in that robe she always wore after long nights, and feel it, the exact moment the curtain lifted. Not from a fight, but from a file. Let her heart skip when she realized. I hadn't just found out. I had been building a case. Every eye roll, every fake smile, every fake client dinner, all quietly observed, documented, stitched together with timestamps and red ink. I imagine her looking at the folder names with her mouth slightly open, hands trembling just a little, trying to process how the hell I got it all. She thought I was slow, predictable, reliable Doug, the guy who packed his own lunch and labeled leftovers. But here's the thing about men like me. We don't yell. We don't chase. We build systems, and then we watch you walk right into them. And now she had. 7:58 a.m. The first message landed. "Cassandra, what is this? Why are you doing this?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Let me explain." Just this. Like she'd tripped over a laundry basket I'd left out, not detonated a mine buried neatly beneath her manicured life. I didn't respond. Of course I didn't. I was already halfway downtown, sipping black coffee in the back of a Lincoln Town car, watching the city roll by like the credits of a movie she'd never finish. My phone buzzed again at 8:06. "Cassandra, we need to talk. Please." I swiped it away. At 8:24, the third message came in. "Cassandra, Doug, are you really doing this? This is insane. Just call me." That one made me smile. Insane, the word manipulators use when you don't fold after they break the rules. When you don't dance to the guilt-ridden rhythm they were banking on. I stepped into the office building. My lawyer, Stuart Harding, was already waiting outside the conference room, tablet under his arm, smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was my age, with the kind of composure most men develop only after being divorced twice and winning both settlements. We shook hands. No small talk. Inside the room were 2 things. A leather folder with my initials embossed on it, and a stack of documents held together with a single black clip that looked like it could slice if you weren't careful. Stuart opened with a single sentence. "Clause 14 is officially triggered. Will hit the judge's desk by end of business. He slid the folder toward me. I read through each line slowly, methodically, because I could, not because I needed to. Everything was exactly where I wanted it. Freeze order on joint financial assets, active. Motion for temporary spousal distance agreement, drafted. Revocation of authorized occupant status in the condo, stamped and ready. Ethics packet submission to her corporate HR, scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp, anonymous but verified. At 9:03, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first. She was calling from the condo line. Her voice broke through the speaker before I even said hello. Doug. Doug, please. Can you just talk to me? Sniffle. Deep breath. Classic Cassandra. I don't understand what this is. Are you trying to humiliate me? Is this some kind of punishment? I didn't answer. She started crying. I know I made a mistake, okay? But this is cruel. You don't have to do this. She was trying everything now: shock, guilt, reversal. The old bag of tricks. But none of it landed. Not this time. I ended the call without a word. Turned to Stewart. Next step. He nodded. We send the digital asset list to her email. Full breakdown of the items she can keep. Everything else locks at noon. Outside, the clouds were starting to shift. The city looked sharp, cut from glass and consequence. By now, she was pacing the living room, phone in hand. I was darting toward the front door like I might walk in and take it all back. But I wouldn't. Because this wasn't an argument. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't even a betrayal anymore. This was procedure. And her tears? Just part of the noise that gets filtered out when the gears start turning. Cassandra had made one fatal assumption. That I would react like a husband. She forgot I was a planner. And the plan had already moved on without her. Cassandra's descent into panic began exactly 12 minutes after I hung up. At 9:15 a.m., she opened her laptop. I know because the IP address registered multiple deletion attempts across her cloud backups. A desperate, scattershot attempt to undo what had already been printed, signed, and handed off. First, she started deleting message threads. The ones with Martin, the ones with her assistant where she joked about riding the CEO ladder to promotion. Even old calendar entries she must have thought looked suspicious in hindsight. She went full bonfire mode, dragging files to trash, emptying them, reformatting folders like she thought the internet had a rewind button. Then came the app resets: WhatsApp, Telegram, LinkedIn. She changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, even disabled photos syncing on her phone, as if that would retroactively erase the ones already archived. By 9:32, she was on the phone with Martin. I imagine her voice cracked midway through her sentence, because corporate sharks like him don't offer comfort. They offer silence the moment liability enters the room. And Martin? He was nothing if not a liability calculator. Whatever she told him, it didn't help. Because while she was frantically trying to unpour the wine, I had already poured it, corked it, and mailed it to her boss's compliance officer with a bow. At 10 a.m. on the dot, HR received the packet. Delivered anonymously, but with all the polish of an internal audit. Screenshots, timeline, company card receipts, and a small note attached. Employee misconduct may compromise team integrity. Please review communication patterns between VP Cassandra R. and CEO Martin L., including expense overlaps and after-hours meeting logs. By 10:18, the email had been forwarded to two higher-ups and the Internal Ethics Committee. Corporate doesn't move fast, unless scandal breathes down their necks. Then it flies. At 10:42, Martin was called into a closed-door session. At 10:53, his assistant, the one who never smiled, was seen boxing up two framed photos and a Mont-Blanc pen set from his office. And by 11:06, Cassandra received a meeting invite. Subject: Ethics Review, confidential. Location: HR Conference 4B. Time: 1 p.m. Attendees: Cassandra R., HR Director, Legal Liaison. She didn't text me again. She didn't call. Because by then, it had shifted. This wasn't about our marriage anymore. It wasn't about love or sex or betrayal. This was about self-preservation. And Cassandra was starting to realize she'd built her career on the exact same illusion she'd built our marriage on: charisma over character, presentation over principle. But now, Her charm was in a manila folder on someone else's desk. And HR doesn't give a damn about candlelight or chemistry. They care about exposure. And I had given them just enough to ignite a slow, deliberate fire, one she couldn't smother with crocodile tears or boardroom bravado. Every panic click, every deleted chat, every frantic password reset. It was like watching a fish try to wriggle out of a net that had already been reeled in. She tried to delete the past. Too bad I'd already submitted the future. At 11:39 a.m., reception called up to the 17th floor. Mr. Adler? There's a woman here demanding to speak with you. Her voice was clipped, hushed, but even through the static of the line, I could hear it. Cassandra was unraveling. I didn't look up from my monitor. Just tapped the side of my pen and said, "Is security present?" They're with her now. She's raising her voice. Of course she was. Cassandra had always been polished, in control, practiced in the art of appearing reasonable until the moment it didn't serve her. But today the cracks were starting to widen. And under pressure, the polish turns to poison. Down in the lobby, she was pacing in her heels like a storm in a glass box. Security footage showed her gesturing wildly, lips moving a mile a minute. She wasn't sobbing anymore. She was shouting, "Get him down here. I'm his wife. I have a right to speak to him." She said that last one while jabbing her finger into the chest of a retired cop with arms like tree trunks and a face that hadn't changed expression since Reagan left office. I leaned back in my chair and watched the grainy footage feed. Cassandra, in her tailored blazer and smeared lipstick, flailing in the fluorescent light like a woman trapped in her own headline. A few coworkers hovered behind me, pretending not to look. They knew something was up. I hadn't said much around the office, but they weren't stupid. You don't come in on a Wednesday with 3 lawyers' calls on your schedule and a new login password unless something's burning. And Cassandra? She was holding the matchbook. She reached into her purse at one point, a bad idea prompting one of the guards to stiffen. She pulled out her phone and slammed it onto the check-in desk. "I know he's in there. I saw his car. You can't keep me from my husband." The word sounded foreign coming out of her mouth now. Husband. Like it belonged to another life. I tapped the intercom on my desk. "Reception?" "Yes, Mr. Adler?" "No contact," I said calmly. "Escort her out and send her the notice." The notice had been ready since 9 a.m., sealed envelope, hand-deliver instructions, containing the formal revocation of spousal access to all joint accounts, benefits, and property. It was also a cease and desist for workplace disturbance, signed by building security and witnessed. Reception hesitated. "Would you like us to notify HR? Let them know she's no longer authorized for any visitation or access under any pretext. If she returns, police are to be called immediately." There was a pause. "Yes, sir." I turned off the monitor. And I didn't watch the rest. Because humiliation, when it's earned, doesn't need to be enjoyed. It just needs to be documented. And besides, I had emails to send. My life wasn't stopping because Cassandra couldn't keep hers together. But part of me imagines the moment the guard handed her that envelope. The way she'd rip it open with shaking hands, expecting some olive branch and finding legal teeth instead. No love letter. No apology. Just a formality. Like the moment at the end of a chess game when the king isn't toppled, just surrounded. And all she could do was scream. At exactly 1 p.m., Cassandra stepped into conference room 4B, the one they use for damage control. The one with no windows. She was 30 seconds late. Unusual for her. She'd spent the last 5 years gliding into meetings 5 minutes early, a Starbucks cup in one hand, faux casual confidence in the other. But today, no coffee. No confidence stride. Just a tight-lipped nod to the HR director and a flicker of panic in her mascara-caked eyes. She was met by 3 people, HR, legal, and someone from employee wellness, which was just a sanitized title for corporate babysitter during meltdowns. They didn't offer small talk. No water. No pleasantries. They slid a folder across the table. Inside were stills of her texts, receipts, audio transcripts, a copy of the company's ethics guidelines. And at the bottom, stapled neatly, a formal notice of suspension pending investigation. She barely got through the second page before her voice cracked. "This is insane," she whispered. This isn't even verified. Anyone could have." The legal liaison cut her off. "Calm, professional, lethal. We've reviewed the metadata. All submissions match internal records and account histories. Cassandra blinked. Submissions? Yes, HR replied. The package was thorough, anonymous, but traceable through verified data sources. Translation: we know it was your husband, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. They didn't ask for her side of the story. They didn't want to hear about emotional distance or power imbalances. This wasn't a conversation. It was a countdown, and the clock had already been ticking before she stepped in. Back at my end, I was in a different kind of room. Not windowless, spacious and sunlit. My private banker's office. Quiet, fragrant, and full of numbers that had my name on them. We were reviewing transfers. Small, surgical shifts. Joint credit card? Cancelled. Secondary beneficiary access? Revoked. Emergency savings account linked to her old login? Sealed, pending verification. Trust account I'd opened for future family planning? Retitled and insulated. Cassandra had always called me obsessive about the financial details. She laughed when I updated passwords monthly, mocked the spreadsheets I kept that tracked asset appreciation and withdrawal history. But that day, as she sat in a cold conference room watching her career evaporate in front of her, those spreadsheets were doing exactly what I designed them to do: protect me. By 3:45 p.m., her badge access had been deactivated. I know because she tried to log into the company intranet from her phone and triggered a lockout notification. At 4:02 p.m., I received a notification that our last jointly held portfolio, a small mutual fund under her brokerage, had been split and moved into personal custody under my existing marital exemption rights. The paperwork was dry, clinical, beautiful, and at 4:37 p.m., she called again. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Doug, I don't even know where to start. They suspended me. Martin's gone. They're reviewing everything. I need to talk to you. Please. We can fix this. We can explain. It doesn't have to be like this. Her voice was cracking like drywall under pressure. Gone was the smirk. Gone the big deal tone. Now she sounded like a woman halfway off a cliff, grabbing at air, realizing gravity doesn't negotiate. She hadn't just lost a husband. She'd lost the illusion of control. The condo? Mine. The car lease? Mine. The retirement contributions she ignored for years while she built her social capital on company credit? Mine. And the savings she thought were ours. Protected by prenup clause, bank insulation, and 2 lines of legal firewalls. Cassandra had always believed in netting comfort over commitment. She just never thought I'd cut the net. Now she was suspended from her job, isolated from her finances, and staring down the hollow echo of every lie she thought would never matter. She wasn't just watching her world fall apart. She was finally understanding. It was never hers to begin with. The knock came just after 7 p.m. 3 soft raps. Then silence. I already knew it was her. Not because I'd been expecting it, but because desperation has a rhythm. And hers was right on time. I let her knock again. Harder this time. Then I opened the door. There she stood, mascara smudged, lips trembling, hair pulled back in a messy bun like she'd tried to make herself look humble, like she thought dressing down would soften the impact. She wore that beige sweater I'd once bought her for a chilly trip to Vermont, a trip she now probably couldn't afford. Her eyes were already watering, which meant the tears had been rehearsed in the car. Doug. Her voice cracked like old vinyl. I know I've said some horrible things. I know I've made mistakes. She took a shallow breath, then reached out, not quite touching me, but hovering close enough to suggest intimacy we hadn't shared in years. But we can fix this. We can. We can talk, right? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I miss you. I miss us. Please. I didn't say a word. I simply turned, walked to the entry table, and retrieved the envelope I had sealed earlier that morning. Off-white. Thick. Her name written in clean print. Centered. I handed it to her. She looked confused for a second, hesitated, then opened it with shaky fingers. Inside, a printed list of her belongings, inventoried and boxed, all labeled, all available for pickup from a storage unit 2 blocks from the condo. A key deactivation notice from the condo building management, signed and timestamped. A 1-line statement, all further communication to be handled via legal counsel. Her hand dropped slightly. I looked her in the eyes. Just one sentence. No anger. No emotion. Mistakes have a cost. She blinked, waiting, like she thought there'd be more. A speech. A tear. A sliver of forgiveness. But there wasn't. Because this wasn't a scene in some romantic drama where the husband breaks down and forgets everything because the lighting is good and the music swells. This was real life. And real consequences don't come with soundtracks. She stared at me like she was trying to solve an equation that suddenly didn't compute. The man she'd assumed would always be predictable, the one she once called passive in couples therapy, had just shut the door on her lifeline. No shouting. No insults. Just the final transaction. I watched her mouth open to say something else, maybe some last-ditch attempt at rewriting history, but I'd already started closing the door. And this time, it clicked behind her with finality. Not just locked, sealed. She had come expecting access. Instead, she walked away holding a receipt. She was sitting at a cafe off 3rd, the one she used to gloat about. Their chai lattes are life, she once told me, like overpriced foam was a badge of sophistication. It was 11:42 a.m. Cloudy. The kind of weather that feels like a held breath before a storm. Cassandra sat alone at the corner table, nursing a lukewarm drink and scrolling through her phone with the kind of nervous energy that doesn't quite show on the surface but leaks into every twitch of the thumb. She looked thinner. Not in the flattering way. In the way that stress carves at the body before it gets to the mind. She didn't notice the courier until he was right in front of her. Plain black jacket. Slim leather case. He pulled a thick envelope out and placed it on the table beside her coffee. Cassandra Reed? She nodded, confused. Yes. You've been served. She didn't even have time to react before he walked away. No drama. No lingering. Just a handoff, like she was receiving an ordinary package. But what she opened was anything but ordinary. Inside the envelope. Finalized divorce papers. Full disclosure of assets. Confirmation of zero alimony per clause 14 of the prenup. Formal declaration of marital breach. A legal summary of her workplace's executive ethics contract, which, due to her confirmed misconduct, activated forfeiture of all end-of-year bonuses and pending stock options. It was all legally clean. Every page notarized. Every term airtight. She rifled through it, her hands trembling now, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to say something, but the words hadn't downloaded yet. And then she saw it. At the very bottom of the packet, clipped to the last page, was a single folded note. In my handwriting. It read, "You once called it a big deal. I just made sure it was." That's when she froze. Her lips moved, trying to say something to herself, maybe deny it, maybe whisper some excuse into the air. But her hands went limp. The paper slid from her fingers. And then the real blow landed. She looked up. Across the street, exiting the glass doors of their corporate headquarters, was Martin. Box in his hands. Plant sticking out the top. His assistant walking 2 steps behind, holding a sealed manila envelope and his branded laptop. He didn't see her. Or maybe he did and didn't care. His tie was loose. His face slack. His career had just ended quietly, efficiently. No scandal press release. No fight. Just removal. Like a rotten tooth pulled while you sleep. Cassandra looked down again at the documents, then at the street, then at her reflection in the coffee shop window. It was all gone. The job. The security. The status. The fallback man. Everything she'd gambled for collapsed. And the worst part? No one was yelling. No one was slamming doors or hurling insults. This wasn't drama. It was judgment. Delivered with surgical grace. And as she sat there, sleeves pulled over her hands, coffee now cold, she realized the real price wasn't what she lost. It was who she'd underestimated. Because I didn't burn her world down in anger. I just turned off the lights and let her see it for what it really was.